just want to thank everybody for being here this morning. We want to kind of have a select group of folks in here to learn about this new technology from Redox. I've worked with Chad Siebold, who's here, with Amy Burke in the past. We have a little bit of history with them. And then John Kelly is here as well, one of the founders and the main agronomist for Redox. So we thought with the newer technology that they're bringing to the market, it's been around for a long time. As they will say, they're probably the best kept secret in agriculture. RDX-N is the main thing we'll really kind of learn about today, and just kind of going to let them go into where they're from, what they do, and why they're here. So just want to thank them for being here, and thank you all for being here as well. So I will hand it off to Amy, and you will notice she has a little bit of a Boston accent, so I will warn you there too.
And we asked to look at our wounds from Sunday night, but I will say we were beat by the better team. We have a young quarterback. We got a lot of miles ahead of us, so cool. All right. So again, my name's, thank you, Alex. So my name's Amy. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I still live outside the city. So thank you guys for coming this morning. So I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of an overview, and then Mr. Kelly here, we're going to go into the deep end a little bit on the science as well. So I've been with Redox for almost 2 years, a little over a year and a half. And one of the big reasons that I joined Redox was, number one, just heard some great things from my existing customers about how great they were. And I had a little envious about how highly they spoke about Redox, but also wanted to work for a family business. And that's the big drive that I came to Redox almost 2 years ago. So we're based in Burley, Idaho, about 2.5 hours west of Salt Lake City, so beautiful high desert. There we have our offices, we've got a greenhouse, we got a full-time research staff, two full-time PhDs, half a dozen interns.
3 now.
3? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
3? Okay, all right. So we can take a molecule from a lab setting to a greenhouse to a small plot to large plot, all the way up to farmer level, which is pretty cool. And we do bring our customers out there for a master class once a year, so hopefully we'll get Ag to attend next year. So.
Or just man, there we go.
There we go. So that's our headquarters right there. So we've been in business since 1994, I think, over 30 years. So yeah, another thing when you think about the businesses that you can partner with, the Moon family, Mr. Kelly, been around for over 30 years. So you don't stick around if you don't continue to do the right things and provide value to the farm. Yeah, just there you go. So John's counterpart is Darren Moon, and Val's the matriarch of the family, and Colton and Cody are the next generation. So at this point, the business has been handed off to the next generation of boys that run the day-to-day. And even though we're in over 20 different countries and we've got over half a dozen patents, we still run like a day-to-day business. Obviously with John here, the family's still in the trenches, right? Still in the truck, getting boots dirty, to go out and educate growers on the value of Redox products. And we live by 4 values. Number 1 is just being passionately authentic, is to tell the truth. Again, you don't stick around for 30 years with your family name if you don't continue to do the right thing. And that's something that Darren and John hold us accountable to, and we hold ourselves accountable to, right? Whether it comes to data or solutions, or you ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, I'll go and get that answer, but we want to make sure that we continue to tell the truth. And then being creatively driven, especially in this market right now, margins are super tight. That's Chad, by the way, right? There he is. We got a pecan farm down in Georgia. So I took that picture. So getting the boots dirty, trying to figure out problems real time to come up with solutions to drive the best ROI for you guys. And then, scientifically knowledgeable. This is a picture of our new research lab that we just built out. It's getting ready to open up. But like John said, we got 3 full-time PhDs right now, so we continue to innovate and drive that pipeline for new modes of actions, new molecules, so we can continue to get better and provide more solutions to our growers. And then finally, just hungry for achievement. This is actually a picture of our research farm that we have in Missouri Valley, Iowa. It's about 30 minutes from Omaha, so we've got about 480 acres of corn and bean plots that we do to provide real-world scenarios of solutions for Redox solutions. So we do events there, like field days in the summertime as well. So if you guys head out to Iowa, you can come by and see our event. And then kind of to frame up what do we do, what do we make, what do we manufacture. We're in the biostimulant space. So I'd say like, back in 2021, 2022, biologicals were all the buzz, right? Everybody had a bug in a jug. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. I would say today the buzz is around biostimulants, right? Everybody's talking about that. What makes us different is that we've been doing it for over 30 years, right? So not only do we have the biostimulants here, but we'll package that with mineral nutrition. And why do we do that? Because that gives us the best yield response, the best plant health response. And we've been doing it for so long that we know that that's where the best ROI is for our growers. We also have a third-party certification. It's called ISO 9001, but basically from manufacturing to shipping all the way to the grower, we open up our books to a third party. It's not a pay-to-play. To basically say that everything that's in the jug or that's on the label is actually in the jug. Because if we're dealing with organic material, right, and you get a jug and you pour it out, you go, this isn't the stuff I got last year, right? We want to provide consistency and make sure that we build that value for you guys all the way through the supply chain. So, and it's a lot of work to get and maintain the certification. Comments?
Has anybody ever heard of ISO 9001? So I'll tell you, we've been around the business for quite some time. I know of 2 companies that are doing this today, right? So when you talk about what's in the jug, is it consistently in the jug? Has anybody ever got a product that was maybe really dark color and then the next jug was maybe a little light? Everybody seen that? I mean, that's what, when you talk about being very consistent and what we provide as a product in the marketplace. John, I think you would probably agree with this. You don't stick around very long if it works once, right? But how do you provide a consistent product that performs year over year? It starts there. One of 2 companies that I know of, and I've been in the industry for over 30 years, that are ISO 9001 certified, so it's a big deal.
The other thing that go ahead, John.
What's the pain in the neck? I mean, the audits and everything, but it does make you a better company. It does.
The other thing we'll talk about in more deeply, but we use the term RAM technology, but we have this RAM technology, redox active molecules. Again, we'll double click at it in a second, but basically that is also a driver of this technology. And I would say, again, when you've got so much noise in the marketplace about this biostimulant, that biostimulant, we've been doing it for over 30 years, right?
Hey, Amy, maybe just if you guys could just touch on a little bit of the difference between a biostimulant and a biological and why one might be more efficient than the other or consistent than the other.
Good, John.
To make sure to understand the difference between a biostimulant and a biological. Well, biologicals technically are a subcategory of biostimulants. So if we look at the worldwide biostimulant market, the United States, we are late adopters. So if you go to Asia or Europe, biostimulants are much more in play. And the reason they stayed is, first of all, regulation. They have a lot more restrictions on chemicals, materials they use, so they have to use technology like this. Country like Brazil, they import every unit of fertilizer into their country, and so it's very expensive, and so it's broadly used, and so the biostimulant market in the United States, while it's growing, is actually a small fraction of what is worldwide. So biologicals can be categorized in 2 categories: those that are presented as a live or with viable spores, or those that are derivative from biological process. So you have metabolites and so on. So those 2 different categories. Redox in several of our technologies uses a biological process to produce the key compounds. But we do not sell any of our technology in a living form. The reason is very simple. It would not meet the ISO certification. And what happens if you produce a living compound, okay, from the time you manufacture, there's a natural degradation process. And some companies are very good at saying, we're going to produce this, you better use it within 21 days. But what we found is we couldn't produce it and keep it viable. And therefore, you have two options. You can stabilize it through heat, or you can stabilize it through pH. And both of those tend to degrade the key metabolites you're looking for. So in our case, because we have to meet very strict guidelines for shelf life, we use microorganisms in our manufacturing, fermentation, but the byproduct, those are all in a stable shelf stable form. So I think we'd all agree there are some companies producing active microbial products that are consistent, that work well, and there's a lot of variation beyond that, and so there's value there. There's value there, but is it most the living organism, or is it metabolized, or is it both? So I hope that answers your question. It is simply a subcategory. If you look at, humic substances, protein hydrolysates, and so on, they're all categories. And, bottom line is what is going in the field, what is working. And I know firsthand there are a number of microbial-based products that are giving very good performance. So I'll leave it there.
Alex, let me do my farmer grade version of that, right? Which is, listen, there's a bio confusion in the marketplace, right? Bio anything. What I would tell you is, if you look at a powerful biostimulant versus a live bacteria in a jug, there's a big difference there. There are some things that we can derive as good things from biology, biologicals, bugs in a jug. There are good products out there. To your point, we measure these in CFU, or it's measured in CFU, like how many live bugs in a jug are there by the time it leaves the factory. The inconsistency of what it is when you get to where you're gonna apply that, that's the problem. At times, we do not disparage biologicals, but we are not a biological. That makes sense. Good question. Any other thoughts, questions on that? And I think to Amy's point too, if you look at a biostimulant paired with a nutrition, that's what sets Redox apart. And she's gonna get more into that.
We also just got our third certification from the Fertilizer Institute, so similar to the ISO 9000, there's a third party out there that does certifications of biostimulants. And I believe, John, we're the only company at this point to have more than one. So
This if you're not familiar with the Fertilizer Institute, they've started this new program for certifying biostimulants with an effort to bring credibility to the marketplace. So it's a vetting process where they're looking at safety. Is this a safe product to apply to crops? Secondly, is the formulation consistent? Can it be guaranteed? And the third is performance. So it goes through a process. It takes time, and so this is happening. If we go, more will come.
yeah, and the two products on the left here are calcium products that I've got samples out in the table if you guys want to take a look at.
I just want to say, I was just in a meeting in Michigan, we were talking, I think you know some of our friends up there, Alex, but there's a big push on boron, moly, zinc, right, in our corn products. It just so happens Velox is something that it's been around for quite some time. We've not introduced it into the marketplace, but when you talk about moly, boron, and zinc, it's a product that we need to look at. Obviously you're moving some Banks products, some dries, but I think it's interesting when we start looking at, and I'm going to steal a little bit of your thunder here, but so my background's unique because we farm in Southwest Iowa. We've been around for quite a while. We've been around since 1858. So when I was brought into the company, it was, hey, we have 36 different products. What products make the most sense in the Midwest? Well, I mean, I kind of know. We've been around enough to be able to figure out. I will tell you, out of the 36 products that Redox has, we brought 6, 7, and we continue to bring more because customer demand saying, well, we want this. Do you have it? We're like, we do, but the problem in our marketplace is the confusion of all the products. Can we be a solution for everything? Sure. But let's take our 5 or 6, dip our toe in, try. Guys, we've been doing some really amazing things over the last 30 years with products from Redox. We're slowly introducing this to producers to be able to replace or displace certain products that are being used today. So,
This is kind of how we frame up when we're making decisions on the field. You guys intuitively probably look at these three areas. We call it an opportunity triangle, but these three things have to work in unison in order to make a decision on the field, right? Economics, agronomics, and logistics. And I would say from the guys I'm talking to, we're all focused on economics. I'm gonna assume agronomics and logistics, we've already checked those boxes, right? That just has to be a non-starter. But the economics is really the driver of how I'm gonna look at my operation going into the next season. And specifically when we talk about RDX-N, we'll explain in the next couple slides how the agronomics work and the logistics. It's gonna be the easy button for you guys, but ultimately it's driving those economics, is getting more out of every dollar. Comment? Like you got a comment?
oh, no.
No, nothing?
I mean, listen, guys, you know, fertility investment right now, you know, and I'm just gonna sneak peek, right, of what John's gonna talk about. How do you get the most out of your investment, right? So fertility costs are through the roof, we know that. I was at a meeting in Iowa, we sat down, we were talking to a different company, but it was inferior corn product called Stein, you may have heard, maybe good in soybean. But we were talking, no offense if there's any Stein guys, but we were talking about some different things, and one of the guys that come up, we were talking about, you know, now more than ever, obviously the economics is important. And everybody's looking at bottom line with your banker saying, where can we cut, including me, right? We start looking at, well, the marketing guy, well, shoot, you know, for 2-3 cents on the dollar, he makes me money. Oh, geez, when we start looking at our agronomist, like, geez, for the money, he makes a ton of money. Like, there's certain fundamental things we cannot cut out of our operation. And bottom line, the economics now more than ever is our fertility costs are through the roof. How do we optimize every dollar we spend to be able to get the most bang for our buck? And that's what John and Amy will talk about here. But again, this is kind of the slide that she's talking about. Is agronomically, you guys know, right? You guys have been around the game long enough. You've got a pretty good fundamental understanding of the agronomics. Logistics, we talk about how do we make it easy, right? How do we ride with a pass? The economics now more than ever is a super important piece of the puzzle. And I'm going to stick specifically with RDX-N. How do we metabolize nitrogen better than we ever have before? And that's what these two will talk about momentarily.
And I'll just add to that, I was in a meeting in Ohio earlier this week, and I feel like because I'm from Boston, sometimes guys ask me questions to like trick me up. So the question I got in the meeting was, how much is too much nitrogen? Which I do feel like it's a different answer from everybody, but I think it is a legitimate question that guys are thinking about right now, right? Because if I back off too much, I don't want to take that hit on yield, right? But I don't want to put too much on, because every dollar I can put back in my pocket is going to make a big difference going into this year. So now we're going to switch to agronomics, and I'm gonna tap John for this, but I'm gonna give you kind of the shallow end. I'm gonna stay in the shallow end as much as I can. But we talk about that we're in the plant energy business, and specifically when we think about plant energy, we think about plant metabolism, and the foundation of the plant's energy system is photosynthesis, right? So sunlight energy, carbon dioxide, water basically kicks off the whole system, and the first thing that's created is electrical charge, just like in this battery, positive and negative. And that system has to stay in balance all the way through in order to create sugar production, carbohydrates, amino acids, proteins, roots, and shoots. The plant has to maintain and will use energy to create 50% positive and 50% negative charge, homeostasis. It'll work every second of every day to create that. Just like you use a battery here, if it gets out of balance, it's not gonna work. Oh, we're good?
Do you remember high school? Did anybody else fall asleep in chemistry class like I did? The number one redox reaction in the world is photosynthesis, right? So if you look at how we as producers, how do we process nutrients? Photosynthesis, right? And the primaries in this pathway, I call it a big circle, right? And this big circle is NPK. I would submit to you that we've hit our limitations, what we can do with those primary nutrients. And what Amy's going to talk about, and John will talk about, how do we unlock the inner circle of metabolizing nutrients better than what we do today? And that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. So what to Chad's point though, we will focus on talking about the plant's ability to metabolize nutrients rather than just getting access to nutrients. Doesn't matter how much I give you if you can't metabolize it and turn it into the production piece of it, right? Those amino acids, proteins, roots, and shoots. But just like a battery, there's a positive and negative charge that's created right out of the gate, and the plant is going to use energy to maintain that charge. just like a solar panel. In fact, we even say that the leaves of our plants are solar panels, right? That's what we say. That's not far from the truth, right? It's converting sunlight energy using charge to create voltage or power, whether in the solar panel, I'm powering a pump, I'm powering my house. There's the same thing inside a plant. I'm powering the production of sugar, carbohydrates, amino acids. Unfortunately, this system can get out of balance. In fact, it most often does. We get involved with this system, the environment gets involved with this system. 80% of the out of balance in this system is because we overapply too much nitrate, nitrogen, which carries a negative charge. And if that plant has to work to create that balance of every second of every day to make sure it's 50% positive and 50% negative, when we introduce inputs and we throw that balance off, the plant has to use energy to bring it back into balance. And again, we'll talk about how RDX-N helps with that.
Before you go into this,
Sure.
can I just pause for a second? This fundamentally, does that kind of make sense? When you think about what we do as producers, more is not always better, right? I mean, we've heard that over a period of time. Why? I mean, look at who's selling some of the inputs, right? There's a bottom line advantage for them to move more product. It's not about pounds, it's about charge, right? Every nutrient, every fertilizer that you apply has a charge. And again, they'll talk more about this, but if that charge, and again, every plant in nature is always searching to become balanced. Homeostasis, you alluded to it earlier. If that charge, again, we chase charge, right? So it doesn't matter if you're a guy that's doing tissue sampling and you're looking at ratios. When you're out of balance and a ratio's off, what's happening? You're gonna go apply something to correct that deficiency, and what happens inside that plant is we're moving charge. We're moving the energy in the plant. What typically happens is when you change that energy, you're probably off somewhere else. And you're consistently looking to balance that plant. What is the plant doing? Stressed, right? We're working extra hard within the plant to be able to correct that imbalance. And John does a really good job of explaining the technical side of that. But fundamentally, that's what I want you to understand is no matter what you apply in terms of nutrients or fertility, there's a charge associated with it. And I will guarantee you our limiting factor in agriculture today is not pounds. It's not a product. It's the charge imbalance that we see within plants. And then if you would, maybe into the next slide, it's very busy. And this is going to go deeper into your stuff. So if you want to chime into this too, John, go ahead.
Keep going.
Well, again, I don't like busy slides, and I too slept through chemistry, right? But think of this as a big circle we talked about, right? NPK. Now the smaller circle, I'll let you talk about this, but that smaller circle is what we want to unlock. That's how we get to the next stage of what I call the limiting factor.
The analogy I use is an apple. We know an apple that's grown today is not as nutritious as an apple that was grown 20, 30 years ago, right? You might have a big giant apple, but take a bite of it and there's not as many vitamins, right? And that's because we've been able to grow a larger plant, but we haven't been able to grow a healthier plant or a more resilient plant. Or think about blueberries, right? They carry antioxidants. Why is that blueberry creating those antioxidants? It's because this secondary system, so what Chad said, this is big circle, this is photosynthesis, this is little circle, secondary metabolic pathway. The sole purpose of this pathway in the plant is stress defense, antioxidant production, phenolic compounds, vitamins, fatty acids, terpene production. Those plants are creating those compounds because it's a stress defense mechanism. We eat those blueberries because it's good for us, antioxidant, right? We don't want oxidative stress in our own bodies, neither does the plant, right? All of our technology is about this secondary pathway. What makes Redox different is we've been focused on this secondary pathway for over 30 years. We understand a lot of it. There's probably a lot more that we need to find out, right? There's thousands of pathways in a plant, but what we want to do is allow the plant to tap into its own ability, right? Its own potential, right? We want to grow a plant. We can't take a plant when it's 100 degrees out and put it inside an air-conditioned room, right? That plant has to withstand the elements. So if we can tap into the plant's own potential to combat stress, right? To grow a plant that can better adapt to its environment, then we have the upside for plant health, plant yield, right? It doesn't get sick as much. It can get beat up a little bit more. So whether we provide the biostimulant that opens up this pathway, or we'll see with RDX-N, it turns on genes that'll open up this pathway. And then we stack that with more good stuff, like mineral nutrition. So it's good stuff stacked with more good stuff. But to Chad's point, this whole system is, the predicate of all of this is I've got to create balance first. And the plant's going to do this whether we help it or not. And so that's why we look at creating plant charge balance first, and then we can get into the good stuff. Cool.
Well said. I know you have another one here to jump into. Do you mind if I introduce John
So before you go there, I want to ask, do you guys have any questions about that? There's a lot there,
It was a lot.
but I don't know that it's as complicated as the slide makes it look. Questions?
That's my job, is to make it farmer grade, right? Because again, when I came into this company, I was a consultant. I was the third party consultant. I was doing different go-to-market strategies for other companies. As my goal was trying to figure out how to make a solution easier for a grower to understand, and then how is it easy to use, right? Those two things to me fundamentally. I spent 4 years doing it with different companies, and when John and I ran into each other, it was, I mean, I won't talk much about Total Acre, but I was a part of the Total Acre group there for a while. We were exposed to 50, 60 different companies that would come in. It's a membership group, for those of you not aware of who they are. There were 650 growers. There was basically 120 of those growers that were basically putting products into play for companies. And so for about 4 years, I was exposed to products that didn't work. Some products that would work once, but we couldn't get it to repeat. And that's where I discovered Redox. And, over a period of time, what's frustrating is you see the inconsistency of products. And I think that when you start looking at foundationally, how do you do something different? Out of all the companies that I've seen, there's a reason why I came to work with Redox. And John, if you don't mind, I'm gonna introduce you and will you take us maybe deeper, but keep it high level where we can kind of understand the fundamentals of it? So John Kelly, out of Burley, Idaho. I think you did a quick job of introducing him. But John Kelly is one of the founders of the company. As our commercial agronomist chases us all over the Midwest, which is, it's a great asset to have. Got a great looking haircut as well, so you maybe a little trimmer than I am. But if you wouldn't mind taking us a little bit deeper dive into Redox and Redox Agriculture.
Sure. First of all, I just want to make the case that take Redox Bio-Nutrients out of the picture. What we're talking about, you're doing anyway. Just in the course of conversation here, I heard of humic substances going in furrow. I heard of discussion of soil health. This is what we're talking about. And when it comes to plant charge balance, just go forward 2 slides for me, if you will. One more. No, this. That's what I want. So when we look at this concept of plants grow, they balance themselves out, 80% of the negative electrical charge comes from nitrate and nitrogen. Most of the positive charge comes from potassium. And plants, by nature, have to work very hard to maintain this balance. In fact, they state that about 40% of all cellular energy in plants is dedicated to facilitating potassium ion channels to get into the plant. So the plant works very, very hard to get potassium in. So that begs the question, if this balance is so important, and when there are imbalances, the plant has to allocate energy to creating that balance instead of setting more crop and producing more, the solution is very simple. We just apply more potassium, right? I mean, that if you're getting too much negative charge, just apply more potassium. Well, it's not quite that simple. Let's go forward 1 more slide here, please. To understand this, let's just take a brief second walk through the nitrogen cycle. There's 3 things that I'd like you to take away. Let's talk briefly about the dynamics of nitrogen in the soil and atmosphere. Then we're going to talk about nitrogen inside the plant. Then we're going to talk about our objective or key outcome of nitrogen. First of all, let's talk about the soil. Soil, of course, has a net negative charge. no matter what form of nitrogen applied to the soil, nitrification process through microbial action is going to assure that most of the nitrogen taken into the plant is in the nitrate form. Okay? The challenge here, the challenge for efficiency, is that during nitrification, if exposed to the air, we get volatilization. And in the nitrate form with a negative charge, susceptible to leaching. So this in the soil is a challenge. So this is what nitrogen stabilization is all about. This is where indefinitely plays a role. Increased microbial activity can incorporate this nitrogen into their life cycles, prevent some of that leaching. That is not what we're talking about. This is aside from technology. Let's go to the plant, and that's what we're going to talk about specifically with our technology. So because the plant readily accepts this nitrate nitrogen, that's fantastic, but the key takeaway here is it can take up nitrate. It cannot use nitrogen, not in that form. It can only store it. This is why we can't keep applying more nitrogen and increasing yield. Because when the plant does not have the capacity to reduce this nitrate nitrogen to an ammoniacal form, to produce amino acids and proteins, which is what we want, it just stores it in the vacuole. The challenge here is, okay, we'll store it waiting for it to reduce, this reduction process. As it's stored, the plant thinks it needs more storage to produce some more vegetative growth. The presence of nitrate nitrogen in that vacuole, as it accumulates, starts to weaken the cells. So we actually are creating, when there's excess nitrate accumulation in the vacuole, we're creating a plant more susceptible to both abiotic or non-living factors, as well as biotic stress or pest pathogens. Okay? So that's the challenge. That's the sticking point right there. Is we want to apply nitrogen to get our yield goal, but if we're getting in the storage form, we're going backwards. So here's why we can't potassium fertilize our way to solve this. Potassium nutrition is very important, and I would argue that all of us in this room and crops, there's typically are potassium opportunities. However, you see these 3 oxygen atoms with this nitrate? The byproduct of this reduction are what are called oxidants. Oxidants, of course, damage cells. So what the plant needs, it needs something to absorb this oxidant activity, just like our body does. You mentioned antioxidants, we're talking about oxidants. So antioxidants absorb these oxygen molecules to reduce cellular damage. So the key component here for this reduction are specific types of carbon that the plant utilizes. Under ideal conditions, great nutrition, great root system, great functioning plant, that plant produces exactly what is required, not a problem, okay? So the plant does this naturally. But it's up to us now, as we push performance potential, to say, well, can we give the plant a leg up by adding into our system redox active molecules, which a redox active molecules is a molecule that can donate or accept electrons. You're doing this already. Those of you who are pursuing practices to improve soil health, improve your root system, you are facilitating the production of key redox active molecules that help this process, okay? So great nutrition, yes. Great soil health, root health, great nutritional balance, all facilitate this process to raise the potential Because if we raise the potential, we're redirecting energy from trying to maintain this balance to actually enabling the crop to set and finish more crop, better performance.
Can I add something there? So I think it's, again, I love the illustrations. Is it making sense? You know, when John talks about vegetative growth, do we get paid for that? We want starches, right? We want kernels, we want density, so in the top right-hand corner where it says the leaf vacuole, and again, not picking on any company that's out there, but there were a few companies that would say, hey, our product works, look, we have more nitrogen in the plant. Of course you do, right? But it's not ammoniacal form, right? It's nitrate nitrogen. And so what I said, and what I was stating earlier is, we as producers, if we're in an environment where we're in an over application and the plant cannot use it but stores it, what happens? Creating our own stress. And what John just said is 100% true. If the plant cannot use that energy that we harness for production, what's happening? It's always using that to correct the stress that we've created, right? And what did John just say about 80% of the negative charge imbalance comes from what?
Nitrogen.
Nitrate, nitrogen. So again, fundamentally, I think just remember that, right? At the core of it all, if we store, and I think most plants, John, correct me if I'm wrong, easily can uptake nitrate, nitrogen. But the ammoniacal form that we need to be able to utilize, it's harder. And this is the nitrification process, right? So how does it take it from nitrate, nitrogen into a usable form? But remember, if it's storing nitrogen, it's causing stress. That's the big key takeaway.
Which begs the question, if the to form an amino acid requires an ammoniacal form, why not just apply straight ammoniacal forms, anhydrous, urea? Why not? Of this, because at anhydrous, you're putting that out. But as that releases, as the soil temperatures warm up, it goes through this nitrification process. And so ultimately, most of that nitrogen is getting up as nitrate. Secondly, ammoniacal nitrogen, by definition, is toxic to plants. It can only accept so much. But it also explains, and it's not widely in use in commodity crops, but in specialty crops is widely used, is the use of foliar urea-based sprays. Why? Because NH2 goes straight to amino acid production. So if you want to stimulate reproductive growth, bypass the soil, put on a light application of a foliar ammoniacal, you're promoting reproductive growth. So it's a very common practice. And for decades now, the citrus industry, the almond industry, everybody knows during key physiological stages in growth, you're putting on ammoniacal nitrogen along with some zinc and boron, and boom, you raise the potential of that crop to produce more nuts or fruit. So so that's the concept there. This is the sticking point, and that's what we're focusing on with this RDX-N technology, is what we're calling nitrogen optimization. So the nitrogen that does get in the plant, we want to take stress off that plant and turn it into energy. The byproduct of that is you can use a lot less nitrogen, much less. Okay.
I'd like to go back a couple slides.
Sure.
And again, it goes back to the complexity of how do we make it easy, right? So Redox as a company has been around quite some time, as you've mentioned, but the focus has always been on specialty crops. So I would argue that there's probably not a tree, nut, fruit, veggie that's in your refrigerator today that Redox probably hasn't touched. If you like watching golf on Sundays, there's probably a high likelihood that Redox has been utilized, their technology has been utilized on those golf courses. Over the last decade, really the last 3 years, was my job to be able to help bring in, as a go-to-market strategy, Redox into the fundamental, how do we utilize this technology in row crop, right? And so, John, if you wouldn't mind, I do want you to talk a little bit about redox active molecules, because before I interrupted you there, you were kind of diving into what redox active molecules were. So it's just fortuitous, as John and Darren were building the company, they utilized the word redox. If you Google redox, or Chat GPT, I guess it is now, right? If you go out and Google redox, it's reduction of oxidative stress. It is a term in chemistry, right? It is something that we utilize in our lives every day. It's just not, again, we talked about photosynthesis being the number one redox reaction. If you would, you'd mentioned it earlier, but you talked about energy. With redox active molecules, we can move energy within the plant where we can accept or donate. Would you kind of dig deeper into that, please, for me?
Sure. So oxidation reduction, redox reaction, is donating or accepting electrons. Okay. So visualize this inside of a plant. If it were July, and we had the proper equipment, we could go out in the field with sap air plant, we could actually measure the relative charge going on in that corn crop. And as it turns out that the ideal range on a corn crop is about 280 to 330 millivolts. So you can actually measure electronically internally in that plant. When the millivolts are too high in that plant, there's too much oxidation going on. Oxidation, of course, are these oxidants that damage cells. Stress. So on a hot day, a lot of nitrate accumulation in that plant, you're going to have a very high millivolt or an oxidative stress. If it's too low, you don't have enough energy. That's what we call the reduced form. So to visualize that, it's happening every day in every plant. There's this range of balance, and this balance in the plant is called redox potential. And what they're learning, and this did not start in the United States, it started in Europe. What they've learned is that plants have an ideal range of this electrical charge in them, and that certain practices and inputs help improve that balance so the plant can redirect energy to performance. So that is essentially what it's about. But the key here is everything you're doing today, those that improve performance, you're already redirecting energy for better performance. You're already doing that. It's just we're now learning exactly how to manipulate that better and more efficiently. Comments or questions about that?
I know more often than not, when we sit down and talk to producers, there's questions that come after the fact. So we don't want to preach to you, right? But I think at the end of the day, you guys will have questions over the next hour. I'd love for you to kind of just throw your hands up, right? It is a different concept, and we talked about it, right, Tom? It's not pounds per acre anymore, right? The next generation of agriculture will be in charge. I guarantee you, within the last 3 years, some of the, I don't want to pump our tires up, but in terms of what we've talked about on social media, people have stolen the language of charge balance, right? It is something that is here. It is never going to go away. It is up to us as producers to understand how that works and how do we, I almost call it a ceiling, right, John? We've hit this ceiling. How do we break through that ceiling? How many times have we been in a field and we've produced 240, 260 bushel corn, and then the next year we struggle? Why is that? Why is after corn on corn struggling, but yet corn after soybeans worse? We always talk about our nitrogen credit. There's more to that than just that, right? It's the nutrients and the availability of nutrients and how we process that as a plant. So, John, you do a really good job of talking about, again, we talk about pounds per acre, but it's the plant's job to do its job. And we've prevented that plant's ability to do that. I would say premium genetics help, right? I made fun of some stuff earlier, but if you don't have that fundamental genetics right, that's the foundation, right? It has to be able, and we see this with different varieties and hybrids. you see different reactions and different charge and energy within plants based off of varieties. And some of that is from RNA analysis and how the structure of that plant and how it's built. But the foundation is the amount of charge and energy that plant can utilize to be able to process nutrients.
I have a different perspective. I embrace everybody talking about new technology. I think it's fantastic. And yeah, it can be a little irritating sometimes when people use terminology they don't really know what they're talking about. But the fundamental background is where we're at is when we look at soil health, nationwide, worldwide, there is a universal acknowledgement that it's in a slow decline. So that's a challenge. But you look at what we need to produce, how much production we need to increase in the next 50 years, it's a lot. They estimate we got to produce 50% more with the same arable land because there is no more arable land, or very, very little. So we have a challenge in that we've got to do a better job, and then we throw the economics into it. Okay, our hands are tied, so we've got to change or do better. So we embrace the idea that there's going to be change, and we love that it's becoming more and more discussion. One of the key things I want to highlight about nitrogen, let's not forget, is what it's done. As you know, synthetic nitrogen in about 1914, a couple of German scientists, Haber and Bosch, perfected a method for taking the nitrogen in the air, which is 78%, synthesizing that and getting that into a synthetic form, okay, of anhydrous ammonia. And of course that technology went towards making bombs for decades, but really in the 1950s is when we saw anhydrous ammonia plants go in. We saw this green revolution. So between genetics and nitrogen, really, we went from our 30 bushel yield in the bushels per acre yield in the early 1950s to 175, 180 where we're at today. So there's been this huge evolution, but where we're at now is nitrogen, because of the dynamics in the soil, the volatility, the leaching, and the limitations on just applying more nitrogen, not getting us where we need to be. We need to kind of rethink how we're doing things. So I think there's some exciting opportunities, not just from us, but from a lot of different companies. So I'd like to go back to, if you can go back to the nutrient slide there, go back. There we go. I'd like to mention a couple things about potassium. We're not here to have a potassium discussion, but improving potassium nutrition is critical. Even though we need redox active molecules to absorb these oxidants that are an outcome of nitrogen. And if potassium is so critical and the plant allocates so much energy, what are the keys to improve potassium nutrition? And I'd like to mention three things. First, soil health is critical. And soil health is going to come down to managing the chemistry, managing the root system, and managing the biology. Those three factors. And we find that if you address fundamental chemistry, and in this setting here, primarily we're talking about you need the lime when you need the lime. Okay, if there's too much hydrogen in that soil, you can't overcome that with inputs, with fertilizer inputs. So lime when you need to lime. The root system, most of the beneficial biology in the soil, well into the 90% plus, is within 2 centimeters of the root surface. So we've got to grow a better root system. So inputs, practices that produce a better quality and quantity of a root system, good soil chemistry is going to bring biology. And so when that soil takes water better, when the the look and feel of that soil improves. That improves the ability of potassium to release properly in the soil. So that's the key factor. The next is timing. Off-season potassium inputs are very inefficient because the tendency of potassium in the soil is to tie up pretty tightly. So anything we can do to get improve potassium nutrition in season when that plant can utilize potassium is going to yield great benefits. And the third thing is potassium input selection, which is going to give us the best potassium response for the input dollar. Next, I'd like to talk about calcium. All of these processes we're talking about, the secondary plant metabolic pathways, are limited or completely shut down when we have poor calcium nutrition. We don't, besides liming, we don't think much about calcium nutrition in the Midwest. However, calcium nutrition is absolutely critical because it is not only for root growth and development, not only for cell wall strength, not only for soil structure, but calcium nutrition of the plant runs cellular signaling. So these are two elements that are really critical to making this whole process work better. Okay? Comments or questions about that?
I guess you might have said this earlier. How do you like apply this redox? Is it broadcasted, or you spray it, or how do you?
Very, very great question. Let's get down to the nuts and bolts, okay?
So John, before you do that, the wild thing, right? So Redox does a couple things really well and did it well before I got here. Is it's educating the marketplace. Most of the time, you won't hear us talk about products. So there are products that are named other things other than Redox. So you're looking about the technology. The product that we're here to talk about to y'all today is called RDX-N. I'm going to let Amy talk a little bit about RDX-N. So this is one product that's going to be, and again, Amy, I'm not going to steal your thunder here, but.
Oh, look at the volume thing. All right, that's it.
Nice. You want to go ahead and take this, Amy, and then John, if we can supplement, is that cool?
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah. And yeah, I think she'll get right to your question, your answer. Yeah.
So we talked about agronomics. We'll talk about it more, but I'm going to talk about economics and logistics, right? So the one product, like Chad said, that we'll highlight right now is RDX-N. So it's a liquid product, and I think we have samples right on the table right there for you. Don't put it in your coffee, but liquid product, comes in jugs, 2.5 gallon jugs. It can come in totes, and we're gonna. So this. It's an 003, but I wouldn't get hung up on the analysis. The powerhouse in this product is the biostimulant package, which is made out of plant parts or plant extracts. So it's 3% botanical extracts in this jug, which we have patents on. That's actually what's doing the heavy lifting. And what John said, like when we talk about the nitrogen cycle, and we're talking about all the good things that you're doing with soil health, soil biology, maybe you are using living biology, other nutrient use or nitrogen use efficiency tools and toolbox. One of the things they all have in common is it's all based on a soil-based mode of action, which is not a bad thing, right? My question to you is, once that nitrogen gets into the plant, now what? That's where you pass the baton, and that's where RDX-N comes in. Because once that plant takes in that nitrogen, it can do one of two things. It can store it, or he can metabolize it to drive amino acids, proteins, roots, and shoots. What we want to do is we want to help the plant metabolize more of that nitrogen. Whether I'm over applying it, I want to get more in, or I'm not applying a ton of it, right? Ultimately though, what I want to point to at this point is the economics behind it, right? So what we're doing, what this product is doing, is this liquid product is going in to the plant and it's opening up that bottleneck, allowing that plant to metabolize more of that nitrogen to get to that end product of amino acids, roots, and shoots. Whether you're using a little bit of nitrogen or a lot. The mode of action is inside the plant. The material needs to be as close to the plant as possible. So you asked about when do I apply this stuff, okay? It's an in-season product. You can go broadcast. That's gonna be the least efficient because the material is meant to be next to the plant. It can go in furrow, it can go 2x2, it can be wide dropped, it can be fertigated, right? It can't be foliar, but get it as close to the plant as possible, as close to the timing of when you're providing that nitrogen. So when I explain it to guys, I think of nitrogen like a bowl of candy. If I have a little bowl of candy, I'm good. If I eat a big bowl of candy, I get indigestion. My metabolism slows down. I need help at that point to metabolize more. That's when I would put RDX-N in. But hey, guess what? If that big bowl of candy is too much, maybe I cut that bowl of candy in half. And that's when we're talking about economics.
So you said no foliar, but what about spring applied wheat with
Streams?
strings?
Yes.
That's an option.
You can stream, yeah.
So, and then will you talk a little bit about pounds here? We're talking about NUE, which is
Yes.
pounds.
So we wanna focus on charge, right, creating that charge balance, but just to simplify it on how much should I use? Big picture, 16 to 32 ounces. It's not a lot of product. If you look at your total nitrogen units to bushels, so if I put down 200 units and I'm getting 200 bushels, or that's my goal, I'm a 1-to-1 nutrient use efficiency, right? What we're gonna recommend is anybody at that 0.9 or above, you should use more material, because think about it, I'm eating a big bowl of candy, I'm gonna get tummy ache, right? I need help. If I'm leaner, I'm under that 0.9, I'm pretty efficient, which I think most of these guys, where are you guys at? Do you know? I get a 1-to-1, 0.6, 0.7,
I'm gonna say 0.8.
0.8.
Where's my control that?
I know. Did you catch the
I'd
rain?
say that's a moving target.
I know.
Really,
Just-
Well, yeah, probably is, but it,
I mean, a lot of,
depending on how far north you go. and
I think
stuff.
everybody hears in multiple applications,
Variable rate. Yeah. Yeah.
what's the crop look like? Do we have a good stand? Okay, let's try to hit the runs. No offense, we're all guilty of it. We kind of use the moron approach. You know, more's gonna be better all the time.
I-
Yeah. I'm guilty of it as bad as anybody, because up until this year, nitrogen's been the cheapest input you can buy, right? Now we're looking
So,
at 75 cents per pound to N. It's like, okay, maybe we ought to
right.
reevaluate what we've been doing here,
Right.
because this is not gonna pencil out very
Yeah.
well.
That big bowl of candy is pretty expensive now. Most of my guys are at 16 ounces. Most of them. Because even if they were heavier, they're like, I can't. I know I can pull some back. And then at that point, they drop below. And then it's like, now I only have to use 16 ounces.
So let me just pause there for a second, because that's nothing against any of us as producers, but we've always done that because it was the cheapest way to pump yield.
Yeah.
But our limitation now is that we know there's a better way to do this, right? There is stress that we cause if we have an environment. This is just known that we are causing that stress. If we can maneuver applications that can actually take on that stress and help metabolize, then we can bump yield, right? If we're in that environment where we're over applying, I think probably not at Purdue, right? Maybe at Iowa State, we'll pick on them. You know, the recommendations are over 1.2 or higher, right? And we'll see, I think you're gonna show some data on, you know, like with Beck's PFR, but then like at Precision Planting, they're talking about high yields, 350, right on like at Mid-Pontiac, at the PTI farm. They were talking about 350 bushel yields of 200 bushel corn, 200 units of N, and still being able to maintain that by going back to 150 pounds, 180 pounds. So if they can do that in an environment where they control that by utilizing different tactics, I mean, we all can do it. It's just a matter of, we're gonna take that approach that we've done forever, or are we gonna look at the economics of how do we get better at what we do and be able to, you know, it's really coming down, for me on our operation, we're looking at cost per bushel. We didn't look at that ever, right? We were just talking about push yield, push yield, push yield. So the new environment is we have to look at the economics. I guess the 16 ounce rate, it sounds like most of you all would fall somewhere in that 16 ounce rate. Price wise at a $12.50 farm gate. I mean, if you start looking at the economics, we'll go through that, but it's the sweet spot.
Oh, enough, that's fine.
So I'll just ask, because I know it's gonna come up, but like, if we're split applying our nitrogen, are we better off running a half a pint with the 2x2x2 and then another half pint with the side dress?
We're gonna
Get
We're
there.
gonna go in deep end, right?
All right, sorry for getting out of the.
No, it's a great question, because where we expect, right, think of early, right? Early season where we're establishing the kernels round and length.
Yeah.
You would want it earlier, right? Well, I'll show you some stuff with Alex Harrell, who's the soybean yield champ, that said, I'm not gonna reduce nitrogen. and put it on a wide drop and had the biggest lift at 24 bushel, 23 bushel. Where he put it on early, he only had a 7 bushel lift. So like there's some stuff, and some of it's probably dependent on the environments. They're light soils, light CDCs. But again, we would recommend the earlier the better. If you're in a high nitrogen environment, high yield environment, there's an opportunity to split apply, and we'll go into that.
Yeah,
Cause I
so,
don't think anybody in this room is one and done.
Sure.
yeah, this work, logistics and economics, that's the focus on this. Now you understand agronomics, how it works inside the plant. We were nominated, I don't think we won, but that's okay. It's more about you guys winning than us winning, so. All right, results. So last year we did, you guys know the Precision Planting Research Farm, Pontiac, Jason Webster's group, right? So we did a trial with him. Last year I approached him and he honestly was done with the nitrogen use efficiency products. He's like, I'm not, I don't wanna do this anymore. It doesn't work, it's not consistent. I don't wanna kill this stuff. I'm like, Jason, you can't kill it. It's plant extract. It's got a 3-year shelf life. Don't worry about it. It's easy. It's gonna be the easy button for you. He's like, all right, what does it do? I explained the agronomics of what it does. He said, you're telling me I can pull back 50% in season nitrogen? Yes. All right, well, I'll start with 50 units first. Let's start with that. So this is one of the trials. He did 3 different trials. This is corn over beans, all irrigated, highly productive ground. He will not go over 299.99 units of nitrogen. That's just his philosophy, right? So for this particular field, he put down 200 units rather. He got 281 bushels on his grower standard. So very productive ground. I would argue probably looking at, I'm not gonna back off anything. I'm good, right? We jump to the left here. He did me a solid here because I wouldn't ask a grower to do this. I'm just gonna pull back 50 units and see what happens. Good, I'm not gonna ask you guys to do that, but he did that to validate that yes, in fact, nitrogen was the limiting factor. I took a 16 bushel hit. So yeah, I was pretty optimized. I should not have done that, right? I lost almost 38 bucks. Okay, all right, so let's see what happens with RDX-N. Took that same 50-pound reduction, he put 16 ounces in at planting with that concealed thing. I'm not a precision planting deal, that little, you know what I'm talking about, right? Sprays along. 16 ounces, so 12 and a half bucks, pulled back 50 pounds. He got a bushel and a half better than his grower standard. Okay. Now I'm validating that that is closing the gap. And then the third one, because again, when you're working with a third party, the good and the bad, the ugly come out. We put this on top of the grower standard. We did the same 16 ounces. We were flat. So I'm sitting there going, well, what did we do? Well, then go back to that big bowl of candy scenario. The way that Jason sets up his program is he does 25% of his nitrogen up front, he does 25% of his nitrogen at planting, and then he does 50% at side dress. I said, we should have moved it to side dress. That's the biggest bowl of candy. Okay, that's what I want to do next year. And we're going to replicate this next year. Make sense? Cool. Completely on the other side of the country, right? Alex Harrell, this is southern Georgia. Light ground, under pivot, low CEC, beach sand, okay? It still grows a great crop, very productive field, right? So he had his field day last year, and what we did with this trial is we wanted to play around with, is a split application gonna give me a better ROI than if I just put it at planting or I just did it at side dress? So similar setup with precision planting, that again, his heaviest load's going in with his side dress, which I'm guessing that's the majority of it. Good comment? Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to add something here. So if you don't know Alex, he's an interesting cat. He is a producer. He farms 6,000 acres. He probably hit the Farm Journal or whatever it may read, AgWeb. I know he just reduced from 6,000 acres to 3,000 acres because he's trying to optimize yield on his higher productive ground, right? So he's kind of a mover and a shaker. But because of these yields, he's the soybean yield champ, right? He's always in the high level stuff. But he's also, as a grower, he's also a retailer. He's selling certain products. And Amy, I'll give you some credit here and pump your tires up. You know, Alex, he's selling a lot of products too, right, within that market. He came into that environment with 15 different companies and said, hey, just sponsor me. You know, pay me, I think it's $5 or $6 grand. We'll let you come into our farm. We'll do some trials for you. Well, there's a lot of products that he sells that are way competitive to what we do. And I told her, Amy, I'm like, why would we go in here, right? There's no way we have a chance to be able to, you know, we're just not gonna get a fair shake. And Amy's like, no, I trust. I'm gonna use your Oz. I trust Alex, right? And ultimately what happened was Caleb Traws, the agronomist that works on these sites, Caleb gave us a fair shake, and you'll see that we beat everything, and all the products that you would probably recognize, we beat everything on the farm, blew it out of the water. So I do want to give him some props, because sometimes he's looked at as the guy that's like just trying to sell product. By the way, he doesn't sell our product, right? So he's just trying to find products just like you guys are that make an impact on his operation. So give him that.
So this is the trial. So again, this field, southern Georgia, planted late, low CEC, under pivot, lighter soil, beach sand. So already kind of on the struggle bus, right? He put 200 units down, grower standard, he's getting 209. So even on lighter ground, it's productive ground, which I would be a little gun shy to say, you know, can we get aggressive? He didn't want to replace. Nope, I'm not gonna replace, I'm going for yield. Okay, we did three different rates. So this one I'll start with all the way to the right here in furrow. 16 ounces in furrow, we got about a 5 bushel swing. It's okay. It's not amazing. Yeah.
Quick, you're saying in furrow, and I'm getting that, because you're talking 2x2 or in furrow, in furrow?
He did
On
in
seed,
furrow on seed.
On seed.
Yes, sir, yeah, but you can do either.
Okay.
Yes, you can do either. This is on seed, 16 ounces, you got 5 bushels. It's okay, right? Spent 12 and a half bucks, it's okay, right? Then he did, what if I do a split application to Bo's point, right? I'm gonna do 16 ounces in furrow, 16 ounces wide drop. Well, now I just spent almost 25 bucks. You're gonna expect me to make you 50, right? We get 9 bushels, it's okay, right? Then we did 16 ounces wide drop, the biggest bowl of candy, you got almost 20 bushels.
21.9.
Yeah, so all day long, that. When I'm not replacing. And again, there's variation there. He didn't have manure on this ground. It's lighter ground. It's under pivot. There's a lot of variables there. It's not, we'll have those conversations so we can dial it in for your operation, because ultimately that's the conversation that I want to point you to the biggest ROI. Understand agronomically how it works. We've got many shots on goal logistically, right? 2x2 wide drop, fertigated, but now it's about putting more dollars in my pocket. Imagine if we had another line that said, and I'll pull back 25 units on top of it. Could we have, right?
Amy, what percentage of his nitrogen went out with the wide drop application?
I think it was more than a third. I think it was up to a half. Yeah, that was the bulk of it. Yeah.
Was the untreated treated the same way, wide drop?
Yes, sir. Yes. Yep. And to Chad's point, so he had a field day, his first field day down his farm last August. And we pulled these ears. You can't see my writing on my on the paper there, but we were even pulling the ears and we're like, oh shoot, it looks like the wide drop had the biggest one. You know, just a couple ears in the field, but we were like, dropped it into Chat GPT after we counted the rows around. I was like, I wish I still had the screenshot, because it gave me like a assumption of what was going to happen. So, but yeah, we'll replicate. He's going to replicate this trial again next year as well. And what I would like him to do is take that. Maybe we get aggressive and we take 50 units and just replace it, just to see what happens, right, on that lighter ground.
So here, I want to add something here, because when I started to see this, I was like, well, geez, you're still not hitting potential, right? Because he's got tip back, or it looks like tip back. This is actually insect pressure, right? So, and John, maybe you have some insight here, but if you're in an environment where the plant is more resistant to pest and disease, right, you should be able to actually push yield. In this situation, he did not pull back nitrogen. So my assumption is he's in an environment where he's a little bit off balance. He's not capitalizing the full opportunity. And so you can see in here, when I started to talk to him about tip bag, he's like, no, this is insect pressure. So he, missed an insecticide path. I think he said it was a worm pressure, but ultimately I would assume next year we could probably pull back or look at that. Problem that Alex has down there is with light grounds, right? They'll push that nitrogen, or they'll push the nitrogen and lose it. Denitrification, that's an opportunity for them to really, I think, get better. Here it's a lot different, right?
His 1-to-1, he's not even really at a 1-to-1. He's losing it right away.
Right.
Yeah.
So in my operation, we are, I'm gonna say a third. We'll take half fall applied anhydrous, and I come back and side dress with a knife and wide dropping at the same time. I'm putting 5 to 8 gallon on wide dropping, and the rest of it, the other 22 gallons going on knifed in. How would that affect the majority of it being knifed in instead of wide drop next to the plant?
In your mind, I mean, obviously you're knifing that in because you feel like that's what's giving you the best bang for the buck.
Yes.
That's where I put it.
Okay. So would this work in my operation then? still, with it being, you know, half of it or more than half of it being knifed in?
So was he adding it in with his 32%? Is that what he's doing?
Yeah.
I throw it in with your UN32. That'd be the best application.
So we have across the board, right? You think about, I call it replacement strategy. Everybody talks about reduction strategies, right? And you're talking about 32 being 70, 75 cents, whatever it is. That's your biggest bang for your buck. If you can replace or reduce, right, that's an opportunity. Fall applied anhydrous, we haven't got to it. Maybe, Tom, if we get a chance, maybe we get on the board and talk about some of the efficiency of nitrogen specifically. And you mentioned, you kind of started to talk about it, but if you look at like anhydrous, if you're going out to Purdue, they're gonna tell you it's between 30 and 40% efficient, right? How much of that actually gets used by the plant. You know, I've been with guys in Iowa that say I put 160 units out and we go 240 bushel corn on dry line. Okay, well that's a lot more efficient than 30, 40%, but why? Right? So we look at the opportunity at anhydrous to pull back a little bit, and then what can we do in season to be able to pump that yield, right? So we can access more of those nutrients as long as we're not leaching it or losing it. We're not a stabilizer, again, we're not like an N-Serve, but if we can make that more plant available with spring applied anhydrous, I don't know if that's spring or fall applied.
It's fall apart.
So whatever that case may be, if we can make that investment a little more available to the plant, we may not need to make that application later on in the season.
So another question then. You're talking in furrow where it's right there where your main stuff here is in furrow right where the seedling is, and then you're wide dropping it, and you're wanting it next to the plant. How mobile is this in the soil?
Yeah.
And if you're wanting it next to the plant, I'm putting over 20 gallon in the middle of the row in 30-inch rows. Is that going to be mobile enough to get to the plant into the root system, or is it going to stay set? Or
You're fine, yeah. It's just
is it
even
going to be too mobile that it'll wash out and go down too deep and won't be viable?
It'll go where your nitrogen goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we even have a trial here on broadcast, which would be the least efficient,
Right.
and he was using 16 ounces. I would recommend bumping that rate up a little bit because again, the material is supposed to go, and he got almost 7 bushels, so it's
So it's not stabilizing the nitrogen.
No.
It's not, okay.
So what did he have in that tank, that wide drop tank? What did he have in it?
3220, I don't, oh, it's right there, UAN 32 in the growth rate.
That's
I
it?
don't know what else.
No
You might
ATS
have-
or nothing?
Particular trial,
I
no.
don't know if he did. But we've
No,
got
he did
a,
not on this.
Didn't?
It would have been 28% if you had any ATS in there or anything like that.
But
Which-
right here we got 30.
Why do you say 28?
To squeeze in some ATS, typically, they'd have to reduce the nitrogen quantity a little bit, yeah. But it's typical in those very sandy soils that their sulfur's gonna be a key limiting factor, so it's not uncommon.
So one of the things that's interesting too is, and this is the green key thing in northwest Iowa, but we talk about this because you're talking about, you know, the efficacy or how long does it stay? Is it in the soil? Is it with the nitrogen? You might just talk about the activity or healthier. You talked about soil health a little bit. Will you talk a little bit about that, maybe just at a high level, where you start to see
Sure.
year over year?
Sure, we're not gonna go over this today, but when we're looking at data on the number of different crops, we do see improved root development with RDX-N. That makes sense. If you're reallocating energy, the plant has more energy to allocate to the root system. A better root system is better biology. And better biology is better zinc, manganese, phosphorus availability, and so on. It is anecdotal, but we're hearing more and more of this where it's been applied to corn and they're coming back with soybean the next year where they stopped with RDX-N, they're getting a yield bump on the soybean the year after. And you can see the difference. And that makes sense because the amount of photosynthase the plant is able to allocate to the soil microbial population is significantly higher. So that carbohydrate produced as a process of photosynthesis, the plant will allocate up to 60% of that out into the root system if it has the energy to do that. Driving biology, which drives soil health, which has a residual impact, even the next year.
Thank you. And I mean, you talked about stabilizer, right? So if we look at the good bacteria, fungi, Like, an N-serve kills good fungi, right? Like we talk about fungicide, right? That kills some of the good stuff. And even though we don't talk about a residual effect, there are a soil health benefit potentially, right? We don't market that, but if year over year you see a benefit, it's because you have a healthier soil, right? And when you think of healthy soil, it's an important piece of the puzzle, but it comes from a good root system, a healthier plant, right? So it's all kind of interrelated. I think that's an important thing though.
Yeah, and to that point, I don't want to say it's easy, but you've probably always seen this. If you're able to improve soil microbiological activity, it's not that difficult to get a 25% increase in nitrogen uptake. Those microorganisms require nitrogen just like the plant does. So if you're able to create an environment where the microorganisms are more diverse, more active, they're consuming a lot of that free nitrogen in the soil. So instead of volatilizing or leaching, it becomes incorporated in their life cycle. That is nature stabilizer right there, because now they're not leaving the environment. They're there, and they'll break down slowly, and that is very, very significant. And that all starts with the plant allocating resources to that microbial population. And so that is powerful when you can start doing that and getting that cycling for year on year to build improvements.
What stage did he do the wide drop? Do you happen to know where the corn was?
It was supposed to be VT. I think he got on late.
I could probably text Caleb and ask him.
Yeah, we'll get it for you.
But we've got other trials that I've got split applications in here that we can show you guys too, so.
And most of the, I mean, I think on the total acre side, we won, it was 83% win rates, right? I know I hate, as a producer myself, I hate hair win rates, but that's pretty significant, right? We see across the board this, and I know you've got some slides on this, so I won't steal, but you know, our win rates were high. On average, well, I don't want to steal your thunder, so I won't. So on average, we've seen on most, if not all of the trials that we utilize for reduction, an average of a 38-pound reduction with a 4-bushel lift. If you did not reduce, we had a higher lift in bushels, but obviously you don't get the savings in terms of nutrients or fertility savings. So I'm not telling you should reduce, but if you're in an environment where you're probably over applying, you need to consider where, you know, and again, you probably what you were saying in terms of where you want to make that adjustment. If you're over applying, look at your least optimal application. That being said, and Amy, this is kind of a fun one. I might,
Just a little bit of a busy slide.
this is very good, but it makes sense once she explains it.
So,
Real quick, to piggyback off what kind of these guys are looking at, it's kind of recipes. So you mentioned that we were talking about humic earlier in the room, et cetera. So I assume he applies humic, sugar, et cetera. So
I put 30 gallon of 32 down. I put 5 gallon of ATS, and then I come back with a quart of humic acid. That was my nitrogen plan.
right. So does that replace that humic or sugar or any of that type of stuff?
No, it's building on it. That's a sound practice that you're doing. It is. And you're doing it because you've seen.
Well, last year was the first year I done it.
Okay.
He making me
Okay.
ATS, be honest with you.
Yeah, so any.
Yeah, I have snake oil salesman.
So humic substances are technically redox active molecules. Now there's various grades, and we won't get into that today, but the concept behind that is you're trying to introduce carbon into the system. That is, carbon is the key limiting factor. So that's the concept there. And so the comment I would make is, you know, we get questions from growers, man, I am so efficient with my nitrogen, I'm at an NUE of 0.5. When you're there because you're doing something right and building on that and even reducing from there absolutely works. So building on the good practices you're already doing are highly likely increased probability of success.
So John, just to squirrel things, because I went to the yoga, so I'm really slow, and I graduated from Carbondale, so I'm even slower.
Well, that's even worse.
Right, so I would assume, if we're increasing the efficiency of nitrogen utilization of the plant by driving that oxygen out and making nitrogen, potash is pretty important. So we're gonna expel less energy in that plant to convert nitrogen over, so we can devote more energy for the calcium and the potassium pathways for that plant to work more efficiently.
100%.
Okay.
I
think
love
that's a
I love
pretty
that.
big key. Like,
I'm sorry?
that's a pretty big key. Like, we're
It-
super inefficient with potassium around here, except for like you with as CDCs in the 30s and stuff. You know.
Pick on
But,
me. Don't pick
You know,
on
we're
me.
down here in the teens and the tens, right, on our CDCs, and a lot of people call that sand, but we call it hard clay because we can race cars on it, right?
Yeah.
And again, I'm just asking questions because I don't know, but if we're increasing our nitrogen efficiency, so we're expelling less energy to build that plant, we should devote more of that energy to the potassium and calcium uptake to help drive all the nutrients in.
100%. In fact,
That's what the slide actually shows.
Okay, sorry.
yeah, in fact,
I can't read it.
you know, consultant.
I think it's because you can't read it. 'Cause it's too far away.
No, I'm bald and fat. I can see pretty well.
One point I'd like to make, Amy, is a crop consultant put it this way, and he was spot on. He said, if I've got my nitrogen optimization in line, the plant doesn't need as much potassium to balance the equation.
Okay.
And he's spot on.
Right.
Plant, and so again, the plant, if it has the energy, can allocate more to ion channels that facilitate potassium uptake. Not to get too geeky, but in the corn root, these were studies done back in the 60s. In a corn root, the concentration of potassium is 60 times higher inside the root than just on the other side of the membrane. So we think of mass flow, we think of how things are taken. The plant root, that membrane dictates what's taken up. The plant allocates a ton of energy to make sure it's getting enough potassium in there. So anything we can do to facilitate that, which starts with root, soil health, root health, greatly facilitates the whole equation.
So I'm gonna ask a question here. So would it behoove me to use then, if I was gonna try this product, to use KTS instead of an ATS? Because it would make that, theoretically, if I'm listening and learning this right, it would make that more efficient on that KTS? Because it would make that potassium more, or
Depends.
K more.
It depends. So, stepping back, one of the key factors behind potassium nutrition is input selection. KTS has some huge advantages in that it's highly plant available, highly soluble. It has the thiazole molecule that accompanies that is universally beneficial as long as you have reserve calcium carbonate in the soil. So if your pHs are moderately alkaline, and you do a fizz test, it's fantastic because the net response of that is very beneficial. The challenge is if we're in a neutral or slightly neutral, that ATS is not good for our plant. Okay, so when I say depends, there's a lot of value in KTS, but under the right conditions. But the concept is right. If I'm putting on nitrogen, we know the plant needs potassium. Yes. Look at ways in season to facilitate that, and you know a unit of KTS is going to be worth 20 units of potassium chloride applied in the fall. I mean, if not more. So the idea is right. Yes.
So that would,
I just want to say, depends on your specific situation, what the inputs is going to get the best bang for the buck.
I don't know if I got the answer I was looking for. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to, and you told me the answer. My question was, would that make that potassium more available if you use your product, because you're making the levels, your nitrogen now is your positives going to your negative, you're going to your 50%, you're going to your homeostasis a little better. I guess that was where I was trying to get that question was going. Am I accurate in thinking that, or am I inaccurate because it would be enough of a quantity to make a difference?
Yeah. I think the bottom line is if you're focused on inputs practices that facilitate plant charge balance, introducing a product like the RDX-N is going to work even better.
Okay.
You're gonna make that case right now, aren't you?
And Alex, I don't wanna misspeak here too, but when we start talking K products, right, some of the things you're offering today versus some of the things you're looking at within the Redox portfolio, I mean, there's some really powerful products that we have within the lineup. We're literally talking about one product, right? We've got certainly a really, Alex, I think when we first started, he's like, you have some of the best dry products on the marketplace. So we've got some cool stuff there too that we could expose you to over a period of time. But this is, to your question, I think this will be interesting.
Just to double tap on that, the 30,000-foot view is when I create charge balance, when I allow the plant to metabolize nitrogen more efficiently, the downstream effect of that is all other good things can happen too. And that's what this slide is showing. So within the Total Acre group, they basically have a certain tissue test level they need to get to based on their yield goal. And then from there, when they take their tissue tests, green means you're good, yellow means, I don't know if you're gonna get there, red means like it's not gonna happen this year, right? And so what he did is, this is his high management site. You can already see, Bro was talking about potassium. This is the potassium column right here. Okay, so he's already like, meh, okay?
So hold on just a second. Let me explain. So like, this is a tool that they use within their grower group. They call it nutrient power rankings, right? It's based off ratios that you guys are all fairly familiar with probably. But when you look at the top part of the screen, if you guys can't see it towards the back, it's talking about nutrients. On the left-hand side, they've got I think it's a 12-week program. They've changed it a little bit. A 12-week tissue sampling program on the left-hand side where it says date. In the top left-hand side where you see the high yield environment and the average yield environment, and then at the very bottom there is where we applied RDX-N. In this specific case, we had one grower that went out and did what the NPR test. He was very confused because what we talked about, AIM, is RDX-N is looking at nitrogen only. And so I just want to set that up for you a little bit.
And this trial, he actually got the product late, so he cut 50% of his side dress. I think it was like D10 or something. I don't have the exact plant stage, but it was later than we wanted. And he started taking tissue. That's why you see the first tissue test was July 17th or 14th rather. So that's the RDX-N. So the YouTube video just posted last night, but the agronomist wanted to break this thing. He did not want this thing to work, which I kind of like, because then when it does work, it's like there's no bias there, right? So he saw, he's like, wait a minute, if this thing is helping the plant metabolize nitrogen, why is my potassium levels good? Or specifically, a lot of guys, manganese. Why are my manganese levels coming up, right? Why is my...
Do you want me to translate that from that? She said manganese, but...
I
It's a different term in Massachusetts.
There's no R's in it.
It's my accent. The sulfur in particular too is another one, and not to get in the deep end, but when we make the claim that RDX-N helps metabolize nitrogen more efficiently, we've got like gene expression data to point and say, we're turning this gene on and it's unique to RDX-N. Specifically, we turn on the gene that helps the plant assimilate sulfur, because that's critical to nitrogen metabolism. We've got that data if you want to go in the deep end. My point is, we've got more tissue tests like this in our trials, and there was a similar trend. I'm not going to make the claim that your tissue tests are going to increase by 10% because I'm not doing that. I'm just saying holistically, I turn the system online, I help the system balance, it can now drive energy right into the roots, work with the biology to do to be the best version of itself. That's what the plant's doing.
One of the things that I guess I like about this is a hot topic for a number of years has been boron, right, and moly. Well, in an environment like you say, Amy, if we're in an environment where the plant can go out and get what it needs when it needs it, and it's in that homeostasis, I would argue that we probably don't need to apply, right? If you look at the top left, where you start looking at potassium deficiencies on the very top in that high yielding site, a lot of these guys like a product that we call P58, right? If you go out and start applying P58, is it really needed? We're not in the business of just selling product to sell product, right? If we can be in an environment, it's been that way for a number of years, right? We started talking about pounds, but if you can have a healthier plant, you see a lot more resilience to a lot of the different pressures that we've seen, certainly with disease and pests, and then our opportunity to make sure that our nutrient values, if you are somebody that's taking tissue sampling and you're looking at ratios, we see an environment that becomes very balanced. So does that answer your question, Bo? Is that, yeah? This is the thunder I stole from you earlier, and I may have botched it a little bit. When you start looking at, you know, just with RDX-N, not reducing anything across all of our acres this year, we had an 8 bushel width I was off there. But, you know, keeping the grower standard, and the grower standard on average was around that 0.9. You know, there were higher, there were lower, but that's the guys that said we're not gonna reduce.
Can I just point out
Yeah.
the psychology behind the guys that were already pretty heavy didn't want to reduce. And then you go to the next one, the guys that were pretty optimized want to see how low they could go. I think that's interesting, right? And we were still more often than not able to actually increase yields on top of it. We did hit some windows on that Severson one. He did take a hit of 4 bushels. He also cut his nitrogen in half. So he was positive ROI, but now he's trying to maybe that was a little too much. Maybe I want to increase it. So still put money in his pocket.
I wanna pivot there instead of showing more results, or, I mean, we could go into a ton of data, but is that okay if we just kind of leave it open for Q&A? And I know we've got some other stuff that we want to show down the line here, but in general, does it kind of make sense? I mean, it's a very complex, for guys like even me, I had to see it a few different times because we've been doing things the same way for a number of years. But conceptually, if you're open to looking at opportunities to be able to optimize what you're doing on your operation, there are ways to do it other than our traditional pathways. And so as you look at the environment that we're in today, we're all looking for the next generation product, the next solution. And Alex, you know, I had worked together in the past. You know, when you start looking at opportunities to put these in play, there are affordable solutions. Redox RDX-N is a product you should look at for next season. Any questions on what you've seen from the technology or what RDX-N can do as a product?
So our area last year, I'm assuming, I think it was almost the entire state here, it turned off extremely dry with lack of rainfall when some guys were wide dropping. So what's the status of this product if there's no rainfall, there's no dew? I mean, I think some guys possibly got some pretty less yields than they would have wanted to with their wide drop application, I'm assuming. I know one guy that did. If you had this, how long can it stay on the surface without deteriorating? The sunlight deteriorate it? Does it have to be put down in the soil, or can it just sit there on top for a while? And
I'm gonna let you answer this, but I do want to talk about the history of the company has worked in specialty crops. So drought stress, abiotic stress in general, like too much water, too much heat. We've got some really cool products that have been able to utilize that. Combat that over a period of time. Foundationally though, what we just showed, if you have a healthier system and that plant is more resilient to abiotic stress, like heat, like lack of water, we always need moisture, right? But I'll let you answer that.
I got a trial too.
Is there a chance you don't have board?
Yeah. Okay. You name it. You can write on that. You can write on that right now if you want.
So your question is, if you have a major stress event that comes in, or you can't get the material delivered to the root system, have we wasted our money? Is that basically?
I guess that's basically the question. I mean, how long can it sit there?
I know you put better earlier or later. And to add to that, timing. Like,
Yeah.
is it better side dress, knifed in, or way late wide drop?
What's the optimum procedure to
Yeah.
apply this? I mean,
What's your
I know
best guess?
most of us in here can probably do it anytime. So, really would like to know what's the optimum time to apply.
I think when you feel like you're giving your maximum nitrogen load to your crop, when you're feeding it the most, that's when you're gonna get the biggest bang for the buck.
For me, that'd be an ammonia, and that'd be pretty good.
So, well, now you gotta go to 32.
I would
Most
say
expensive one to do it.
in season nitrogen, when you feel like you're delivering what's giving you the biggest nitrogen response is when you're gonna.
You can talk.
That's
It's
when
fine.
the best bang.
Okay.
I'll just
Roll it away from you, it's fine. So what's the most optimum pounds of nitrogen per bushel that you people see?
Optimum.
Pounds in to a bushel form.
Can you eat?
Well, Technically, there's,
I mean, that's gotta be the goal we're headed here.
yeah,
for, right?
technically there's 0.7 units of nitrogen in every bushel of corn,
So that's what you think is the most optimum,
technically.
the
Now,
most efficient we can get.
we're in Illinois. The University of Illinois has done some pretty interesting work in nitrogen. It's not real popular with fertilizer manufacturers. Okay, here's what they found. They found that nitrogen applications anywhere from 21 to about 42% of applied nitrogen actually gets into the crop.
How much?
21 to 42%. They found that what they did is they took radioactive isotope, attached it to NH3, and then they followed it to find out how much of that actually got into the plant. That's your 21%. Okay, an in-season application, they're finding you can get low 40%, but overall was 33% of applied nitrogen gets into the crop. So really, no matter how you look at it, 2/3 of the nitrogen in a crop is coming from nature. And it's interesting because the University of California did a similar study, but in California, 95%, irrigation, fertigation, unlimited opportunities to apply nitrogen, 34%. So it's very consistent, saying that about 1/3 of the nitrogen is getting into the crop and the rest of it is provided by nature. And we saw, you pull out about 50% and you don't do anything about it, you're gonna lose bushels. The average we've seen in third-party studies from cucumbers to corn is if you pull back half your nitrogen, don't do anything, you lose probably about an average of 15% of your yield. Which you would think, you pull back 50%, you're gonna lose half your crop. You don't. But it's an economical loss. So going back to the original question, what is the best bang for the buck? Is you look at your system, when am I applying nitrogen and getting the very best utility of that nitrogen in season? And when I say in season, from planting to any type of in season application. And I would say the data suggests that when you're giving it the biggest hit of nitrogen, that's where you want RDX-N going on.
Let me put that in a visual because it's easy to talk about, right? But what that looks like in numbers. Sorry, I'm gonna be in your way a little bit here. But let's just take an average production in the Midwest. Certainly not here, right? But if we talk about 200 bushel corn, right? 200 units of N, right? We all can kind of figure out the NUE to that, right? Even like our math guys, right? Like our 1-to-1 ratios, right? So if we start looking at that 1-to-1 ratio, great. Well, you had just mentioned that if we're in an environment where we're fairly optimized and we're somewhere around that 0.7, at 0.7, how many units of N are we technically using to grow 200 bushels of corn? Roughly 140 pounds of N. Would you guys agree with that math? That's my Iowa math. But to your point, depending on if you go to the University of Illinois or whatever university system you want to talk about, not all nitrogen systems are created equally, right? So every efficiency across the board, we were talking to Brian in Iowa, and Brian, again, he's applying 160 pounds of anhydrous units of N, 180, whatever, right? But 160 units in via anhydrous and grows 240 bushel corn. He tells me that his efficiency with anhydrous is 50%, right? Okay. I'm not going to tell you what that efficiency is, but I would assume that a liquid nitrogen is more efficient than anhydrous, right? Or even a dry. Would you guys agree? Maybe? So how efficient would you say is the most efficient form of nitrogen in the world? And I don't know if there is a right answer, right? Because if I got a guy that's a good friend of mine that can tell me that 50% efficient on anhydrous, okay. Can we just use that number? All right, so let's say we use the best form of nitrogen in the world is 50% efficient. So now how many units of N are we using to grow 200 bushel corn, right? And whatever reason, our initial investment was 140 units, right? We're only utilizing half of that. Where RDX-N technology works is it increases that efficiency to be able to make that investment more available. That's the simple mathematics, and the economics of it turns out to be something like this. If we can come here and take our initial investment, let's just say it's 140 units again, and let's say we replace 20 units, right, of N. How many units, what's the cost of the unit? Billy, you were just talking about 32.
It's 70 cents per pound of N right now.
All right, so let's say, I can't do the math, but you know, at 20 units an N, at 70 cents,
14 bucks.
it's 14 bucks. So if I can tell you at a $12.50 investment, you can at least save $1.50 an acre and maintain or bump yields, right? And what we've seen in some environments, even if you're fully optimized at a 0.7 NUE, we can save money on your investment from a fertility standpoint, and we can bump yields because we can minimize the amount of stress within that environment. What I would also argue is when you start looking, if you remember the slide that she showed earlier, is if we have a healthier system, guess what? We may not need to look at another application of another nutrient because we get what we need from that plant over a period of time. These are not things that we claim, right? These are things that we know because of the technology that plant does what it needs to do. Does that help explain kind of in the math side of it? And to your point, right, when you were talking about, can we cut out, I think you were kind of talking about anhydrous, right? Can we take that out earlier? The equation still works, but you know, at 45 cent, what's an H3, 45 cents?
Somewhere in that ballpark, yeah.
So you can still do the math, right? It may not quite pay for itself, but maybe you want to pull back a few more units. Maybe it's 30 units of N or anhydrous. What's the math? 12, 13 bucks. You can see it's, if nothing else, it's at least a break even, if not making a little bit of money, being able to reduce nitrogen. And that goes back to your slide when you started to talk about, on average, a 38 pound reduction with a lift or maintaining yields. And you guys seen that, right? If you remember the precision planting slides, that was a 50 pound reduction. And I would say that was flat. I think it was a bushel, maybe a bushel and a half gain. But just because of that 30 or 50 pound reduction, and I think that was 32% or 28, there's a huge ROI there. So that's what I would contend to you is there's an opportunity where the economics, what you mentioned earlier, starts to make a lot of sense if you can replace and maintain yield, or look at other opportunities where you don't necessarily have to displace or add other products to the market or to that cropping system.
I did want to show this trial because you asked about rain. So same thing happened in Central Ohio. This was a third-party consultant. We did trial with the RDX-N. The grower did not want to replace.
Can you show them what they're looking at? Can you open?
Oh yeah. Well, so there's this is the layout of the fields, and so the grower was at heavy on his nitrogen, but did not want to back off. Okay, he did 16 ounces at his side dress with the 27002. And then the interesting part is the third week in July, the rain shut off. Remember, similar what happened here. So this is the precipitation or lack thereof, right? It just zeroes out. And then on this side, the red are the stress degree days, went through the roof. Remember, he applied 16 ounces of RDX-N in his side dress. And these are growing degrees days. I'm not making the claim that, nothing can replace rain, but I've got a data set here to show you that even on a later application when the rain did shut off, because we're able to address the fundamental issue of helping that plant balance itself, again, it's able to drive energy and combat the stress that it was under for the remaining of the season, and you got 7.7 bushels increase on top. So what would he have gotten if he had caught the rain?
So John, we talk about, manufactured nitrogen. What about organic? What do we mineralize out of our organic matters? We're talking about efficiencies and so on.
Well, that's where biology comes into play. You know, it's humbling to realize, okay, we've had this green revolution with synthetic nitrogen, but even with that, 2/3 of our nitrogen is coming from Mother Nature. 2/3. And that's, you just can't get past that. So to the degree that we can promote that side of it, and that's our plant working with microorganisms, root system of the soil. So that to me is exciting because we do see that. We do see growers that are able to focus more of the equation on, hey, let's get Mother Nature working for us even better.
Alex, I don't know if, oh, go ahead.
I've enjoyed this, but I have to be somewhere. I appreciate your guys' time. I would have a ton more questions, but I do need to leave.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us.
Alex, did we talk about OsmoFlow? I know she's got some stuff on, let's talk about natural fertilizer, you know, manure application and salts. Would it be okay to talk a little bit about what we do there, or is that something you kind of want to?
You can talk about it a little bit. I know some folks in the room deal with really high salt content in their soil, sodium, you know, and so if OsmoFlow is something that can help mitigate that, that would be.
I mean, I think it's interesting to talk about, right? For the guys that are using litter or manure and have a high salt environment, you know, OsmoFlow, again, it's not RDX-N, but it still has RAM technology in it. Will you talk about flocculating soil and what that can actually do for a tougher system?
Mm-hmm. So this technology has been in development for a while. The key takeaway from this is it induces salinity tolerance in the plant itself. So it's very interesting on the molecular side, the biostimulant component to this. So while it does help flocculate the soil, it does help the leachability of salts, the key function of the product is salinity tolerance induction in the plant. So when it goes out for trial compared to the multitude of soil surfactants or various soil amendments, or it's a stark contrast because you see this huge plant response under conditions where salinity air-water relationships are a key limiting factor. And the bottom line, the best way to use this technology is just a light rate early season where you suspect you're going to have problems. Economical to put 8 ounces in furrow, or you know, if you have the capability, if you're irrigating, you can put it through the center pivot. That works well also. So it is very unique technology, and if you have sites where you know that sodium chloride or salts in general are a key limiting factor, it's worth a look.
I think part of it's all thanks salts, because we see salt kills with the well or some of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's a different ballgame, but literally we've just been spreading salt on our soils for the last 50 years, right? And
Right.
every time we spread potash, it's 53.7% salt, right? So somehow you have to buffer that and make it available. I think there's some merit to products like this that might help.
Well, ultimately, hydraulic action is what's going to solve our salt issues. We gotta move it. That helps, but the key differentiator for this product is it's really powerful on plant action itself. So literally a plant growing better under conditions normally it's limited.
The only other thing I wanted to talk about there too, is there any irrigators in the room? No. So I was gonna talk a little bit about bicarbonates and some of the stuff that we had there, but I guess that's a non-issue out here.
Nope.
We're not fortunate enough to.
Come on, you are way more fortunate. You don't have to use them here. Mother Nature,
Yeah.
God gives it to you.
Yeah.
Probably a good time for a break, and then maybe put up a couple different slides on Cypher. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be fine. Just real quick on this. So you said in-furrow or irrigation. Are there other application methods that would be used to where OsmoFlow would be beneficial outside of those two?
Yeah, any way you can get it out. You just can't spray it as a foliar.
Okay.
The surfactant technology in there, you could burn your plant or you could. We don't see that, but
Yeah.
wouldn't want to do that.
But you could broadcast it with your pre-emerge.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Big deal for us in Iowa and Minnesota is in our hogs, right? We got a lot of slurry. So 1,200 head hogs, you got 450,000 gallons of slurry. You know, every time we're pulling off 5, 6, 10,000 gallons, we're dropping it. And that's another application strategy for guys who are maybe in manure or hog slurry.
Amy, why don't you tell them what we're looking at there, cause I didn't really have that.
So, I know, I took this picture and they didn't know. So we were in Idaho last month, and this is in our greenhouse, so that's Dr. Gift on the right, and that's my New York dealer on the left, and he hauls manure for a living, and he grows like 300 acres. But on the grow boxes on the right, there was Grower Standard with the humic, I believe, and that's all they pretty much did. And then a week later, they planted on the left, plants with manure and then they put OsmoFlow and.
Both sides had manure.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. But they applied OsmoFlow and RDX-N on the left, planted a week later, and you could see in the greenhouse, like any boxes near like the window will get like the breeze and stuff. It's kind of, they get beat up because it's colder, and they were noticeably like much larger, to the point where Chris came back and said, I want to be a dealer in New York because I haul a bunch of manure and I think I can move this stuff. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, visually we could see a huge difference. So there's yellowing if there's uneven emergence, right? And in New York, that we've got so many dairies that he's coming back, he's doing 20,000 gallons and then coming back and do another 20,000. He's doing a ton of it. So not like this area, but
There's good data on OsmoFlow and function and everything, but in your scenario where you're not irrigating, and if salinity is a key limiting factor, there's just so much bang for the buck getting that crop up and growing better, faster, and the economics of putting a half pint in furrow just to get it going quicker, faster with your starter fertilizer, to me makes a lot of sense.
And I know you've got a heck of a starter program. I mean, I think that might be an opportunity at an 8-ounce rate to kind of look at that as an enhancement. But again, if you're in that environment where you maybe need to push some salts or have that, it's basically a surfactant that'll grab, and the flocculation alone in the soil, right, where it's a tighter soil, we have heavy clays, right, and that's an environment for us that works really well. So
we're going into chemistry, so you gotta grab some coffee, but I'll just pick on you, Jamie, since we're talking ahead of time, that we want to tell you guys about this tool that we offer. It's a tool in a toolbox. It's called a Redox Cypher Soil Report. It is not meant to replace the grid sampling or any of the extensive testing that you're doing with your existing labs. This is just more information.
a free tool, right?
Well, for you guys.
Free to you tool. So it's definitely something that'll perk ears up. Free's always good, right?
We got a 1 acre grid of this.
Yeah, right. It's like 50, 70 bucks. But we're gonna go over actually the tissue test that we saw earlier in Rockford, Illinois. This is their soil sample. This is a composite. So again, it's not a silver bullet, it's a composite. John's gonna walk through it. But we do 2 different types of soil tests. We do a chemical extraction, so we do a Malic 3 right here on the left. This is what's giving you on base saturation. And then we do an extra soil test called a soluble paste. And what it's doing is they're taking that soil sample, they're drying it out, they're adding deionized water, and they're pulling out the soluble mineral ions that are available to that plant. So think of this as your savings account, and this is your checking account. What the plant has access to, it can see. I'll give one example and then I'll hand it over to John. Phosphorus, 23 ppm, he knows it's tied up, right? Why is it tied up? Because it's connected with something, his calcium, his iron, right? Well, I can say you've got 0.16 parts per million that are actually plant available. If I converted that to pounds per acre, it's probably 0.01 pounds per acre. And you're like, well, I know that. Okay, so a lot of times it will validate what you already know through your tissue test or walk in the field. But sometimes it's gonna point out something that you didn't know. Like your calcium, for example. Now, he already knows intuitively, well, not intuitively, he knows because he's looking at his base saturations right here. He's got low calcium, he's got high magnesium, he's got low potassium, low sodium. But even what he has that's low, even less than that, is actually soluble. So now it's a head scratcher going, how do I solve this problem in the field? And how does it relate to my plant? So I'll shut up. That's all I can do.
Well, I think you've said it all.
No, because when we get down this rabbit hole of like soil chemistry.
Well, the background on this is, it's going on 35 years. We've been dealing with additional data beyond just what the norm is. And it was a number of years ago, we started compiling data, and we find that it can tell a story. So The traditional soil report gives you about 15 data points, and it's always really good, valuable information. As Amy said, this is not a replacement for that. This is to help diagnose or fine tune or identify some additional opportunities. So what we did is we started compiling years of data and work in identifying optimum levels of plant available versus total nutrients. So if you just scroll up to the next page there, Chad. All right, so the concept here is, here's this brown bar is the average out of our database of base saturation calcium, just over 70%. So from the areas that we work with, both foreign and domestic, that's the average. And we see here, okay, it's below. His magnesium's higher than average. But what does that mean to the plant? Well, here's an optimum level based on this soil, and here's his actual soluble calcium. So what does that mean? That means that may be an opportunity. So it drives us to decision making. Scroll up to the phosphorus. Just keep going, right there. So he's actually well below the average phosphorus levels here. I mean, you know, he probably doesn't use manure, or, you know, probably doesn't. Otherwise it would be very high. But again, here's the total, here's the average. Versus optimum. And this optimum is significant because this changes. These optimum levels that this report kicks out are dependent on the soil and many different factors of where the optimum level is. So if you go all the way to the top of the report, we say, okay, we got 5 pages of data. What does it all mean? Well, we highlight what are the high priority items. So we look at soluble potassium, magnesium, calcium, phosphorus. All right. Having said that, won't show up on there anyway.
Oh.
No. So here are the key opportunities. Then we step back to what can we do about it. Okay.
Can I just a comment here? What I like about this is, first off, if you look at the chemical extraction, like you said, does anybody know when Malick grease came out? 1984. What about Bray ones? 1930s, right? So and I agree with you, John, right? There's no doubt that there's value in what those bring. But we're working off technology that's 40 some odd years old, right? I do love the fact that when we show key opportunities, it doesn't say a product by RDX-N, right? It gives you an opportunity to look at things differently compared to what maybe a traditional chemical extraction has done. And most of the guys that we work with, and I know Alex, you're kind of implementing this strategy of give me your most challenging dirt, give me your better dirt, and let's find opportunities in between. And that's kind of what that key opportunities looks like.
So, you know, when we look at each other, say, okay, what can be done about this? What makes sense? What's the crop and what's the opportunity? And what we find is if these are the opportunities and we focus on things that improve that, we tend to give a high probability of a better outcome. In this case here, I would say, okay, it's a high magnesium soil, but it's also moderately high in hydrogen. It's got a pH of 6.1, but you got reasonably good organic matter. It may or may not be a problem, but would liming benefit this? Liming would help the magnesium issue, would definitely help the hydrogen. Whether it's economical, that's another question. What's the cropping system? But it could be justified. When it comes to calcium and phosphorus, what do we want to do? Do we want to facilitate solubility of existing calcium and phosphorus, or add a little bit of calcium and phosphorus at key timings, or both? And how, what, when, and where depends on the crop and the capabilities. But it gives us a pathway to improving performance. So that's the bottom line. It's another look, and if you're looking to raise the bar on performance, this information can definitely, offer some perspective.
I think maybe just two other little things that I think is pretty, this is unique to us and proprietary based off of algorithms, right? The math that you talked about for the last 30 years, right, over a period of time, showcases what's optimal or more plant available. I think the cool thing here, like on our dirt in southwest Iowa and Nebraska, it's a little bit different on that. We farm on both sides of the river. But we have tight soils, right? We have high mag soils, and we know we're always a little bit deficient in what we think we know we're deficient in, right? But our issue is like, we think we have enough calcium, we're not even close to enough. Right? Our mainstay calcium, which I don't know if you guys are promoting that or not, but the calcium with mainstay SI is a product that we need all day, every day. Nobody really understands that, right? And so it just gives them, what do you call it? Just an extra look, or it makes the invisible maybe a little more visible on some of that plant availability.
Perspective.
And you might talk a little bit about this too, but you know, these are tests that cost us money, but we do this for our dealer group and our customers to be able to kind of showcase, like, here is probably an opportunity, right? Like that's you.
I mean, I think over the years, like I said, we're not very smart in Illinois sometimes, but like, we've always associated, we fixed our calcium because we fixed our pH, and I think there is a difference between the two. You know, one is affecting how that plant utilizes nutrients, and the other one's actually fixing the acidity of your soil. There is a significant difference, and I don't think we make a big enough point about that. Just in general, and we educate everybody, right? Because I still have to learn and figure this out. But just because we have a 6.5 pH doesn't necessarily mean our calcium is correct, available to move nutrients in and out.
Let's bring up the board here if we can. You guys know how to do that? Or?
Sorry,
I'm gonna talk about.
You wanna do it on that screen? You wanna draw on that screen that she had up?
She just wants to.
No, just on a blank.
Oh, okay.
You just do that.
Okay, there you go. All right.
Well, that right now.
I think
Yeah, okay. Let's,
it's not working.
You don't have the magic touch like I did.
There you go.
So,
let's answer that, because before the meeting, this was brought up, and I forgot that it was asked. So let's break this down. Okay, that's lime. And we have excess hydrogen in the soil, low pH. You apply lime, what is the outcome of that? Well, you get free calcium, you get water, you get carbon dioxide. Okay. So the reason when you have in hydrogen on the soil colloids, which have a negative charge, only attached to one, it won't attach to the other, whereas calcium attaches to two and it flocculates that soil, opens it up. So too much hydrogen tightens the soil, limits root potential, and in an acidic environment favors most fungal pathogens in the soil. Okay, so that's lime. So you think about here, you've got your calcium, carbon dioxide, nothing but beneficial. And that's why it's so important when it's appropriate. The key here is you gotta have that hydrogen to react with. Okay, now, if I want to clear this, I clean it.
Oh.
you got it figured?
Okay. So the question comes up, what about gypsum? Okay, and how, when and where is that appropriate? Okay. First of all, we've always been told that gypsum is a soil amendment. It's actually not true. It's a water amendment. I'm going to explain why. So, calcium carbonate, lime, is not soluble, but in the presence of hydrogen or an acid, it creates a reaction. That's where we get the carbon dioxide, the calcium, and the water. Calcium sulfate is not reactive, and it is soluble. It's just not very soluble, but that's okay. What happens is, in the presence of water, Okay? You get a release of calcium and sulfate sulfur. This sulfate sulfur has nutritional benefit, but it is oxidized. It doesn't acidify the soil, doesn't change the pH. Okay? And so, but this process is relative to the purity and particle size of the gypsum applied. Okay? So under ideal conditions, somebody grab a calculator. Under ideal conditions, if you had the purest gypsum in deionized water in a laboratory environment and it was heated. Okay, who's ready for me?
My phone's off. I shut off my phone.
Fire away.
Okay, take 15 times 20 divided by a million times 100 times 8.3 times 0.2. What do you got?
0.0498.
Okay, 0.0498. That's the amount of calcium you could dissolve in 100 gallons of water.
Nothing.
Not much, but I'm gonna make the case that's okay. Because what happens is in water, the relative amount of calcium versus magnesium plus sodium, that dictates how well the water penetrates the ground. Now rainwater is not pure H2O. What else does it have with it? It has carbon dioxide that absorbs in the atmosphere. So rain is providing carbonic acid, which is why rainwater is so beneficial. Solubilizing calcium, solubilizing phosphorus, it's moving into the soil. When we have pure irrigation water, what we're trying to do is apply the gypsum, because as we raise the calcium a little bit in irrigation water or in rain, it penetrates more, faster. And what that does is that moves salts. So ultimately it comes down, you gotta move water. So that's why I say gypsum is more about moving water than it is about being a soil amendment. You say, well, I put out gypsum, the soil's mellower, it's taking water better, and you might even cultivate easier. That's true, but it's all about the water. Okay? So when and where to use gypsum, the reason to use gypsum, the reason this is beneficial for moving salts is because it moves water more. That's why they say don't disc gypsum into the ground, leave it on the surface. You want water contact, dissolving, even though it's not very soluble, solubilizing that, changing that water so it moves the salts better. Lime, you don't want to work into the soil because you want it in contact with the hydrogen. Okay, so that was a question that came up, where and where gypsum. Use gypsum to move water, to move the salts.
Say that last part again about lime, you don't wanna work it in either?
You do.
Oh.
You do want lime because you've gotta get in contact with that hydrogen. The more hydrogen you get in contact with, the better the reaction. Right. So you work lime in, leave gypsum on the surface.
You were talking about positives and negatives there earlier. If you spread lime, is that a negative?
If I'm doing this right, okay. Okay, in this form, it's inert. I mean, there's nothing happening until you react with hydrogen, which has a positive charge. And the outcome of that is calcium with 2 positive charges, carbon dioxide, which in and of itself is stable and then water. So the outcome of this is you're actually adding more positive charge to the soil. Yeah. And by the way, because this came up in our discussion on the break, when we talk about this, we looked here and we looked at pH and EH. EH is a term for redox potential. And we say, okay, on a corn plant, we want our millivolts here between, 280 and 330. That's the prime range for energy in that plant. If it's too high, too much oxidation going on, that's a plant under a lot of stress. I'll tell you right now, with all our testing, you get a corn plant put on, as soon as you put on UN32, boom. Goes just above where you want it to be with nitrogen. That, going back to our discussion. What we want to do, and what RDX-N does, is it keeps us in this ideal range when you apply the nitrogen. That's really why it's allocating energy to that. But this applies, this millivolts and redox potential applies to soil as well. The ultimate measure of soil health is ideal redox potential. That's energy, proper energy allocation, where you don't have too many electrons working on this, just the right range. Okay? All right. So that, because it was brought up, we wanted to talk about gypsum and salts and so on. I hope that was helpful. Does that make sense? Any comments about that? Okay.
Well, it's always a pleasure to see the board in action, but to me, again, it's the next level of chemistry, right? Hopefully that's not foreign language. I like the questions, right? We're talking about charge and energy and balance. That's always the thing that I think you need to hold everybody to the standard. Understanding whatever product you're applying, knowing what type of charge that brings, and in that sweet spot, is that gonna affect that plant's ability to do what it needs to do? Be thinking through that. Ask the question, you guys. Ask that question. A lot of people can't answer it. We can help kind of decipher whether or not you're in an environment with some of the tools that we have where that plant can do what it needs to do over a period of time. We've talked specifically about really 2 products, maybe 3. There's 36 different products that we offer. Certainly some that you're going to evaluate this year. I guess one of the things too we talked about is Beck's PFR and some of the different things. You know, we're looking at opportunities to do that with you as well in this area. At the end of the day, again, some of these products have been out for quite some time. I would like for you, just because you've been around it since inception, so RDX-N is not a product that just came about, right? It's been in the process of being made over a period of time. There's certain products that Alex and I have talked about that we've been doing certain things for a long period of time. We as a company still haven't introduced the product. We talk a little bit about RDX-N and kind of the foundational approach of how long we've been utilizing this product in the technology.
Long time. Well, if you want to go back to the history, early on Redox, we focused primarily on permanent specialty crops. That was our area of expertise, so like grapes and apples and almonds and so on. And our very first technology was called Oxycom, and a lot of table grape growers were using that. They were seeing vineyard recovery, improved performance, and so on. And I get a call from a well-known university researcher, an hematologist, said, "Hey, can I get a hold of some of this Oxycom material?" He said, "I've got a USDA study that we're going to be doing." I was like, yeah, I'll get it to you. And later he told me, "I asked for your product so I could disprove it." So I was tired of getting phone calls, people asking about this material, so I wanted to disprove it. He ended up publishing with a cooperator researcher from Pakistan. They both published in the journal Nematology stating that OxyCom, the title of the article's OxyCom induces tolerance to plant parasitic nematode parasitism. What they found out is plants grew better. So, okay, so that's the background there. But this professor was well known, and maybe 2-3 years later, he calls me and says, "Come to my office. Bring Darren. I'll make it worth your while." We show up. He goes, "I've been working with some botanical extracts, and there's something to them." He said, "There's a few problems though." He said, "First, they tend to be phytotoxic. Secondly, not even close to economical. And third," he said, "if I take this to a company like Bayer or one of the big, they'll just ignore it and nothing will ever happen." He says, "You guys are innovative, see what you can do." So that was 23, 24 years ago, and we were already developing other products, but it started a process where we were looking at specific botanical extracts, and one of the categories was called naphthoquinones. So really, and that is the core technology behind RDX-N. So really, we're talking 23, 24 years ago is when it started, and lots of trial and error, and a lot of work on our end. And it was an idea brought to us from somebody else. Says, "Hey, there's something to these." But he gave us a scenario. He said, "I've seen something from these," but he says it takes 900 pounds of raw material per acre, and it's phytotoxic, but there's something to it. So it was just an idea. It just took a lot of years to bring it to fruition.
I think it's a great story, right? But I also will tell you, in my shoes in the Midwest, why have we not seen this product sooner, right? A lot of this stuff has been, and it's nothing against like the focus has always been within redox and specialty crops, up and down the East Coast and West Coast, in tree nut, fruit, veggies. I feel lucky to be able to help introduce these products into the Midwest. The fact is, a lot of this technology has been around for quite some time. It's not been focused in the Midwest. Certainly, some of the proven products that we won't even talk about today have been in the system for quite some time. 15 years is what we've been working with another product that, like, come on, you guys, let's release this. We need this product in the Midwest, right? And John will consistently say, "Chad, why don't you sell what's on the ship," right? Like, but again, the foundation to the business and some of the core technologies, it is different. But just know that the products have been proven over a period of time, and certainly high level production, high level specialty crops. Just now here over the last 3 or 4 years after 23, some of these products are being introduced in the Midwest. So it's certainly a good technology.
Well, and I'll tell you this, it's not for a lack of interest, but it's who you deal with, right? I think we have a high degree of respect for the mainstream distribution, but really what we're trying to accomplish and what our values are not shared. They want to move a bunch of fertilizer, and we're trying to be more efficient. It's kind of contradictory. Does that make sense? So to be able to ally with the right people of the same mindset is easier said than done. And so we feel very fortunate to be collaborating with people that have the same goal in mind, which is, hey, can we make the grower more money?
So I think it's worth mentioning that too, right? So our go-to-market strategy in the Midwest is to work with people like Tom and Alex. We're not going to go to the large retailers because of just that. Again, it's not that we don't respect some of the things that they do, but like over a period of time, we've been selling a bill of goods that's maybe been somewhat detrimental, but yet in terms of pounds, we continue to buy pounds, right? And so Alex, Tom, thanks for the vote of confidence in bringing some of these products to the market. I think it's a privately held company, guys. We'll be patient over a period of time. If you want to try an acre, if you want to try 1,000 acres, we'll be patient over a period of time. Privately held companies that are not startups in this noisy world that we live in, kind of ugly, right? We'll be patient over a period of time and we'll work with you hand in hand. Alex, what do we miss?
I think just if anybody has any other questions, I think Josh went to get the food and everything, so it'll be here shortly, so timing wise, perfect. But does anybody have any other questions while we've got these folks here? You know, these are the brains of the operation, so, once they're gone, we'll have to call them with your questions. So.
Do you have any wheat trials with Redox?
With the RDX-N
Yeah.
specifically?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Do I have with me?
Yeah.
Do you?
No, it's on YouTube. I could show you like the YouTube video if you want.
Sure.
There's a pull it up.
Yeah, but he sprayed it.
It's what?
He sprayed
What
it.
these typically apply in your environment here, so winter wheat,
Yeah, I mean, hopefully in the next,
I'll show you this
two
one.
weeks
The
to 3
video
weeks, we'll
works.
be putting on our first shot of it in.
I was gonna say, by St. Patty's Day is kind of the last time.
Hold on, guys. RDX-N, I just had it yesterday. I'm just playing. Who's this guy? This guy. I think he's a TikToker, by the way.
So we're out here in our Sequa farm. We put on some RDX-N at full year time with our insecticide and our fungicides. We cut our fertilizer at the dry application early in the spring in March, and 50%. And then we spread 16 ounces of RDX-N on this wheat here. And it worked out pretty good. We did see a little bit of yellowness, so we did throw in an extra 32 units of liquid urine, and we ran that through the water, which made it completely even and brightened it right back up. And as we did that, that still cut us back about 30 units of nitrogen on this field, because we cut our dry application in half. And right now we're still yielding 150 to 140 bushel, which is pretty dang good. We're not gonna complain out here in this sand, out here in this wheat. So that's kind of where we're at. We've been super happy with Redox. These guys have come out and helped us out a lot. We appreciate all their efforts and everything that they've done and all the technology that they're putting back that they help us out here. So we're out.
I don't even know shit, but that's a great
I think
endorsement.
he's like a TikToker guy.
But didn't he said he put that off the chemical.
Put on fungicide.
Fungicide.
He did.
Fungicide, insecticide.
No, 32. But
Yeah,
you're not
listen
supposed
to
to
it again.
foliar it.
He's like they got some experiments going on awfully.
So
That's why I was like, I don't know if I should show.
He did what you're not supposed to do.
He's experimenting.
Independent results may vary.
Because it can defoliate a plant like
Well,
this,
then-
you know.
let me ask you this thing, because I don't know if you do this, but I think you do two pass. Yeah, so we're putting half up front, stringing it, and then coming back 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, stringing the other half. So would you do half and half, 8 and 8? Obviously 16 and 16 would be great for you, but no. But how would you apply the redox in that situation?
It's a good question. I tend to lean for just putting out the 16 ounces on the first application, letting that go since they're so close together. But I think putting out 8 and 8 would be fine too.
Okay.
But don't know. Don't know. I've never done that in wheat specifically.
My guys in Ohio literally asked that same exact question 2 days ago. I'm trying to figure out the same thing. We were saying, is it 8 and 8? Is it 16 up front? But definitely, if you had to pick, you'd go up front versus later because that plant's already going to work. So,
But I know we're not talking about other products, but when we look at the dry products, there's a dry product that I'm sure you guys are maneuvering in the marketplace, but John Parrish did a lot of work with Redox Dry in the fall. There's some other cool products out there too that we can probably work to trial this next season, but RDX-N certainly is a interesting product to be able to put on different crops. So one of the questions we had out there is actually this week. We were out in Maryland with cabbage. I don't know anything about cabbage, but they're utilizing RDX-N they're wanting to use RDX-N in cabbage. What's Chris talking about?
So for quality,
I mean, there's just overall quality. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you're looking at, I don't know where this weed goes. Yeah, so I mean, some of the specialty crackers that are out there, some of you get premium price off density and quality, but proteins. There's some, you guys are playing around with ideas.
You're talking it's a dry product to go to
mix with your dry fertilizer?
That is what we did in the fall a couple different times.
You put that in furrow with your fertilizer and the wheat?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if you're already moving product like that out here or not, but that's Redox is what we're doing with the dry.
I'd say just on the wheat though, like we obviously went off, we focused on the largest nitrogen acres, corn. I still to this day, probably 80% of my conversations are around corn. There is a growing pocket of wheat, and then I get a bunch of crazy guys that want to try it on soybeans, which I did not have soybean data, but I've actually asked John this morning, I go, is this legume metabolism different from a grass species? And he said, no, not necessarily.
Once it gets in. No.
So.
Yeah. So, we're learning those
Yeah.
crops, yeah.
Would you like us to set some trials up to do the 16 and 8 and 8?
Absolutely.
What are the typical wheat yields in this area?
80 to 140.
Yeah.
Depend on the rain.
Yeah.
Yep.
And where it's at.
Do you have lodging
Harvested
issues?
on it.
Pardon?
Do you have issues at lodging?
You can have, depending on, a lot of times manure guy or wheat guys have manure and those applications can get a little heavy, yes. And then there's windstorms.
Yeah, right.
We didn't talk much about soybeans, and that might be for another day, but obviously there's some opportunities there as well.
Well, yeah, especially with 218 bushel beans
We didn't want to go on his beans last year because you get burned, you're gonna get burned bad. But I mean, we got a micro. I'll show you. We got a micro pack.
Barry, he runs a drone over, it's like a 10 acre thing, he runs a drone over every week with something. I listened to him speak a handful of times.
Yeah, and it's, so
He's throwing a lot of money at it.
and a lot of money at it, and what's really interesting is they're shifting from high yield to optimal ROI,
Yeah.
which is gonna change the game, cause okay, so you're growing 620 bushels of corn, it's not even close to being economically feasible. What if you can grow 400 and it's economically feasible with a good ROI? So that's the shift. Do you have any comment about where that's going?
I mean, again, I spent some time with guys like David Ula that talks about, 623 bushel corn, but the yield potential of a bag of corn, probably bags is higher than most, right? But is it 1,000? Right? Is it 1,200? What is it? But we know as soon as we put it in the ground, we start to have some sort of stress that's robbing yield. So the more that we can fix whatever type of ailment over a period of time in 120 days, the better off we'll be. But I think you're right. I mean, it's coming back to a situation where how do we optimize cost per bushel, right? Now more than ever, we live in a world of commodity priced input or commodity price commodities. We have to control yield, right? And we have to control some of our costs. It's a tough environment to be in, but we have some tools that might help this year for y'all.
ROI is why we're in business next year, right? That's what we.
That's right.
Yeah.
But isn't that what we need to be focusing on every year?
It is. We focus on yield too much.
Unless corn goes to $8 a piece or 20, but I don't think that's gonna happen.
Calling.
Yeah. Hey, they're on the way up today.
Everybody's in puts.
They're up today. That's curious.
So on your soil test that you had earlier and your tissue test, on all those, the calcium stayed the same on your tissue test. What you'd expect?
A tissue test for calcium is inherently inaccurate. Because it cannot read calcium pectate, which is the form that calcium takes in the cell wall. So it's reading ionic or free calcium. So we learned this the hard way in the fresh fruit industry as we're looking to analyze for post-harvest quality. You run a traditional test on tissue, it doesn't read cellular calcium. So you have to do additional processes, typically involves additional digestion and so on, to dig deeper on calcium. So calcium, it's an indicator, but we know from experience that the calcium is inherently inaccurate in the traditional tissue test. A SAP test the same way. The SAP is only testing what's in route. It's not telling us.
Can I ask you a question on that? Cause I literally, some guy asked me yesterday, I didn't know the answer. So if his tissue tests for calcium are high in the beginning of the growing season and then drop low, is that because that conversion of calcium pectate's going on during that cell division time in theory?
I would say, I don't know.
Okay.
I would just say when it's high, you're reading free calcium that's running around the system. You're not reading what's in the cell, and so I would not wanna jump to conclusions there.
Okay.
I would just say you cannot, just inherently, you cannot dictate or tell what's going on with calcium with this tissue test alone, or a traditional tissue test. Takes a more in-depth analysis to do that, and it can be done, but labs aren't gonna do that because it's a lot more expensive and time consuming.
Now I can answer his question. I didn't know.